just kind of having that mission and that purpose. It's having a sense of purpose, and then having a little one again and raising her up. And, she spends a lot of time in the shop with me, and it's like just finding a purpose, having something that you give back to, whether it's a charity, whether it's taking classes at the college, finding a purpose for yourself so that you don't have that feeling of, well, I dedicated my life to all this and for what? And now I'm out of it. And because in all reality, the minute you walk out the door of your agency, you're forgotten. It comes back to you're a position number, and they've got these deputies in the academy that are graduating. And as soon as you retire, they promote someone into your spot.
This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, the veteran-owned brand where every sip inspires you to live life full steam ahead. I've been drinking their coffees for a while now, and I'm glad to partner with a company whose products I use. At Trident, they're more than just coffee. They're storytellers. Crafted by veterans, their instant cold brew is perfect for those who serve, those who have served, and anyone who values wellness. Featuring natural ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics, it's more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's your new wellness ritual. Enjoy it at home or on the go, wherever your day takes you. Trident Coffee isn't just about great tasting coffee. It's about empowering you to be the healthiest version of yourself, because great veterans make great citizens. Try their instant cold brew today, along with many other coffee products, and taste the freedom of wellness. Remember, when you choose Trident, you're not just choosing coffee, you're choosing a path of connection through health and wellness. Head on over to tridentcoffee.com and use the promo code TDP15 for 15% off your order. Again, that's TDP15 for 15% off your order. This episode is brought to you by Softlead, a tactical fitness company founded by special operations soldiers. Softlead is dedicated to helping you achieve a healthy lifestyle. From expertly crafted training programs to high-quality proteins, pre-workouts, and sleep and recovery supplements, they've got everything you need to power through your day. Softlead also has a full line of clothing. They have you covered from shorts to cold weather gear. Embracing the motto, Die Living, Softlead inspires us all to embrace life with vigor and resilience. So take the first step towards a healthier you. Visit Softlead.com, that's SOFLETE.com, and use the promo code TDP20 to get 20% off your order. Again, that's TDP20 for 20% off your order. Joining me this time is a retired police officer. He spent 28 and a half years in law enforcement here in Southern California. He retired in 2023 from the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department at the rank of sergeant. During his time as a cop, he worked traffic, but he was also a SWAT guy and even worked narcotics. His big thing, though, is finding your passion once you step off the cop train. His is woodworking. He had actually been doing it before he retired, and it's his job that he's continued since retiring. He's even been featured on the home improvement or DIY show, Restored. Additionally, he volunteers with the Cannonball Memorial Run. It's a nonprofit organization that gives back to the families of fallen officers. This was a fun conversation. Here's episode 155 with James Snow.
Chris Lee, my buddy that works for SEBA that's doing the documentary on transitioning, he's coming tomorrow to film me installing the cabinet that I was building when he was doing the initial filming of the thing. So he's like, this stuff's so good, I've got it edited down, I just need to finish it. I'm like, relax, Chris.
What's causing him to want to do the documentaries on transitioning?
It was, well, he basically, he works for SEBA. So he just finished up one. Well, this one's going to be like a major, like hour long or hour and a half. The other ones he does are like shorts, but that's what he does for SEBA, is like find law enforcement related topics that he thinks will introduce people. So he did that documentary I sent you on our charity, Cannonball Run. So he did that documentary. Then he just done, I think he just won his 4th Emmy for a short. So he did one on Jeremiah McKay and Alex Collins from the Dorner incident. He did one on welfare fraud. He just finished one on the welfare fraud with the DA's office and welfare fraud, because the DA's office falls under SEBA, under our association. So he just did one on that. So basically, and then when they were up for they're doing, like I said, he's doing one for Honor Guard that's like an hour and a half. Well, they came up and picked up some plaques for me that I did they were going to stop at a couple agencies on the way as representatives of Cannonball. And so they came to pick up the plaques, and he was filming all of that. And while he was there, he was like, you've made a successful transition out of law enforcement. He goes, I think that's really something that needs to be, kind of focused on, that, when you leave this profession, there's things that people aren't used to and people aren't really ready for. So let's document this and, show people that. I was like, whatever, Chris, if you want, I'm in.
Was he making movies and then got brought in by SEBA, or was he just kind of like a hobbyist that happened to be with SEBA? Do you know?
We talked about it the other day, and I'm trying to remember. He was starting to make films and then was brought in by SEBA. His wife and daughter started making like YouTube videos, and I guess like it just exploded. They went viral. They made videos where like their daughter would like dress up as like different costumes and stuff, and the YouTube videos they did one with their boy dressed up as Chip and their daughter Joanna from Chip and Joanna Gaines from DIY Network, and it just went viral. They actually got invited to Plano, Texas to meet Chip and Joanna, so it had just gone tens of millions of views. So like that kind of took off, and I want to remember what he was doing before. He worked for the county doing something, I think, and then was like, that just wasn't, really what he wanted to do, and he got interested in this, and so.
I'm a perfect example. You don't have to have any knowledge base to get into making this type of stuff. Get a decent camera, decent audio, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
The editing, obviously, at the end of the day is where you're going to make your bread and butter.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking too, and that's his thing is, excuse me, he's embracing AI. He's like, a lot of guys are running from it. And he's like, I'll plug after I'm done editing, I'll plug it in and, hey, write me a script for this, do this. He goes, just to kind of, check myself. And he goes, the way that AI is like exploding, it's one of those things that, hey, if I can leverage this to my advantage, why not? Why run from it? Because it's going to be the future. I don't think there's any way of getting away from it.
Well, and you can relate to this a little bit in the progression of woodworking or millworking. You go back, 25, 30 years ago before CNC machines. And as soon as they came on the job and like, hey, wait a minute, I can push a button and this thing will, instead of fighting it and saying, I'm never going to, you have to embrace it, because if it's something that can take your job, you need to get ahead of it and make sure that you're utilizing it to maximize your efficiency.
100%. And it even goes back to the hand tools. I mean, there's guys that don't want to use a router. They don't want to use a table saw. Everything's hand tools. And hey, good on you if you have a market for that and people are going to pay for that many hours put into a project and you got that clientele. Awesome.
I'd like you to make me a table, and I don't need it for 3 years.
Exactly, 1,000%. I actually just bought a 4x8 CNC, a full size. So for the last 5 or 6 years, I've had a smaller 2x4, and I'm kind of getting back into cabinet making now. I made, did full custom cabinets for a lot of years, and kind of getting back into that on top of the furniture I make. And so I was like, what's going to save time with that? And the CNCs they have now, the one I got, it's got a full vacuum table, 8-tool auto changer. It'll cut a 4x8 sheet of plywood, all the parts for a cabinet in 8 minutes per sheet. Turn that off, sorry. So it's like, why? Yeah, it's a big investment, but it's going to pay itself off pretty quick. So that was one of those things that I was like, let's make the investment, and it's going to cut 40 hours out of a job.
Yeah,
being able to do that. So it was one of those things where it's like, if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And
and that's exactly it. I mean, especially if your livelihood is based on it,
right?
If you hit the nail on the head when you said it's about efficiency. I need to be able to stay efficient, and I need to be able to produce and reproduce a product over and over again as quickly as possible. If this machine allows me to do it, why fight that?
Right. As quickly and accurately as possible. I mean, when the guys came out to do the training for the machine, they we got the thing all set up and it cut the first thing, and we checked square and it was within like 0.003 of an inch. And it's like,
good enough for me.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, I can't do that on a table saw.
Right.
Yeah, my stuff will be relatively square and I know how to fix stuff. But when it comes off like that and the holes are already drilled, it's like, No, the amount of time it'll save is just, and then bringing my daughter in and training her. It's like, you don't need to be a rocket science to run the CNC. The program comes out of the software they have now. You design your software, 3D cabinetry, you hit a button, it optimizes it, it lays out your sheets and nests everything optimized to get the best yield out of all your material. Yeah, you can't. It comes right out, take the thumb drive out to the CNC, plug it in and hit go. It's one of those things that you don't need to be a great woodworker to do the initial cut, rough cutting of all your materials. Then when you're getting the final assembly, you get more into the skill side, but the rough cutting of the materials, and at 56 years old, throwing around 4x8 sheets of plywood or melamine is, those things are heavy. And to get them up on a table saw and do all that's like, oh, you mean I can just roll the card over and slide it off on the CNC and hit it go? Okay. So
what's been the learning curve though, as far as from the computer side, learning how to actually design stuff on the computer, or is it pretty easy?
The programs they have now are pretty intuitive. I mean, it relatively simple. You click and drag the cabinets in, extend them, and with YouTube now, I mean, you can learn how to do brain surgery on YouTube, and they've got so many videos.
I tried it one time. It didn't go exactly as they said on the video. I kept having to pause and go back to the video.
Yeah, it's actually not bad. And I actually kind of embraced that. So I started doing cabinets in probably 2005, 2006. And I had bought a 3D computer program to kind of show clients like a 3D color rendering of their project. It's sold a lot of jobs because, women especially are very visual people. Whereas a guy will say, explain to me what you're going to do. Whereas women want to see it. So I would do, color 3D rendering, and hey, it's a lot easier to move cabinets around now when it's a click and drag than. And those programs back then were real rudimentary, but it was a CD. Now everything's subscription based and online. But I got this CD, and it was like $3,500 at the time. I was like, oh my God, how can we afford that? But it worked, and so having that knowledge already and using that program for the other day I couldn't find the CD because our computer finally died. And I was like, I'm going to throw it back on just so that I have it because I know it so well. But I can't find the CD, and I'm like,
new computers don't even have CD drives in them hardly anymore.
No, the new one we just bought, and then I went to look, and I'm like, there's not even a CD drive on it. Man, this is crazy. But so yeah, the embracing the technology side has always been, I was a mate guy, so as a mate guy doing all the accident reconstruction stuff, all the software and technology involved. Oh, I love it. I know not everyone's a traffic guy, but.
Well, that's a nice segue. But let's take you back to the beginning.
Okay.
Where were you born? Where's hometown?
I was born in Fullerton, California. I was adopted at birth. So I was born Orange County. I grew up in Fountain Valley. My parents bought a house in Fountain Valley in '66 for, I think, $18,000. They still live there. So parents have been married 68 years this year.
Wow.
So, yeah. So
good on them.
Grew up in a very solid, stable household. Like I said, they had my older sister 4 years later. My mom was told she couldn't have any more children, so they adopted me at I think I was 5 or 6 days old. And then right after they had gone through the adoption paperwork, my mom got pregnant with my younger sister. So when they went to court for the final proceedings, my mom wore this big baggy coat because she was afraid if they knew she was pregnant, they'd say, no, you can't have him. So, and, grew up there. What
did mom and dad do for work?
Early mom was a PBX operator, telephone switchboard operator for Lucky Stores. But once they had me, then she kind of stopped working to be, stay home, raise the kids. My dad he was an aerospace engineer. So he worked for McDonnell Douglas and Boeing for pretty much his whole career. He worked for Bechtel Power Corporation for a while. San Onofre Power Plant, worked on that. And then went back to Boeing. Well, it was McDonnell Douglas, and then Boeing bought out McDonnell Douglas. So he worked in Long Beach his whole career. He retired at 79. So I asked him for years, Dad, you can retire. Why don't you just retire? And he was like, I like going to work. they pay me stupid money. And he's like, if I retire, I got to be home with your mom all day. So I think I'm going to see it out. So at 79, my mom's got some health issues. So at 79, he had told his bosses, if you get to the point where you're going to lay off some younger people, because, the aerospace industry, especially the military side,
right.
He was the lead support engineer on the C-17. So he was like, if we get to a point you're going to start laying off younger guys, let me know. And, I'll take my retirement. And so I don't want to cost, someone with a family their job when, I'm just right now, I love coming to work. So at 79, they came to him and said, hey, we're getting to the point we're going to start having to do some layoffs. So he said, okay, cool. Took his retirement, and he's been home taking care of my mom since.
You think about it though, to get to 79 and still love doing what you're doing, love it. And I mean, I'm sure there was a little bit of tongue in cheek when he said, I got to hang out with your mom, but he had to have loved it to go there every single day.
Absolutely. And that's, so both my parents, my mom grew up in Kansas, Midwest. My dad grew up in Missouri. Both of them grew up with alcoholic fathers, dirt poor. My mom, was, I can't even remember now, I'm blanking on the city, but grew up in Kansas, dirt poor. Their mom made their dresses out of potato sacks. So, coming out of the tail end of the Depression era. My dad, same thing. He's born in 1937. So, just pre-World War II, he grew up on a farm. So, up at 3 a.m, working on the farm and doing stuff on the farm. So that work ethic that, they grew up with, just got passed on to me. That was one thing that my dad, I can't think of a time when he was never, working, doing something around the house. He added on a room to the house when I was a kid, and just that if something broke, he fixed it, and it was that. And I get a lot of people ask me, well, how do you know how to do all this stuff that you do? And it was like, well, either I was taught by my dad, or the way he taught me was, if you don't know how to do it, go to the library, get a book, go to, by the time I was old enough, you could go to Lowe's and buy books on drywall. And, and it was like, okay, I want to learn how to do drywall. You go buy a book, and now it's YouTube. But at the time it was, if you want to learn how to do something, you learn how to do it. If you can't do it, that's how I learned how to fix cars, was either shadowing him and, working with him, or because he grew up fixing tractors and, out on a farm. When you're dirt poor, if something breaks, you fix it, or it's not going to work again. So that, having that example, I remembered when he had, as a kid, when he was adding on to the house, he had me come out and, I was pounding nails, and, I'm pounding nails into this siding. I'm bending every other one. And, he comes out and he's like, what are you doing there? And I was like, I'm putting in the nails. He's like, you're bending them all. And I said, well, it's going to be covered with the siding. You're never going to see them. And he goes, but you're going to know they're there. And he made me pull every single one of them and drive them all back in straight. And and that lesson stuck with me. This that even if it's to the point where no one else is going to know, you're going to know. And at the end of the day, you got to look yourself in the mirror and be able to say, you know what, I did it right. And that lesson, as, a 7-8-year-old boy, stuck with me throughout my entire life. And that's just, that's the way my parents were, and growing up in that environment, and that, with them as my parents and the example that they set. They never really fought in front of us. We knew they fought. You could hear them upstairs, but,
right.
But they never really did it in front of us. And, my dad was just always rock solid. He was that guy that got up in the morning, went to work, came home, was never too tired to, have me pitch to him in the backyard. And, in high school, played water polo and swam, and, he would get off work early to come and watch my stuff. And it was always that, he was never too tired for his kids. And that example, I'd love to say that I took totally to heart, but, as I got in, we'll talk about it, careers as we get into that, but, being a young cop and wanting to, be able to provide for my family, a lot of times I wasn't there for and part of it's the field that we went into is
right.
You're working Christmases and holidays, and, you're not there the way, that he was there for me. But the example he set for me of what a man and what a father is, integrity in your word is your bond. That's it. And that's how he lived his life. And to this day, still lives his life.
Was Fountain Valley, when you were growing up, still largely agriculture, or a lot of old farms?
Yeah. A lot of farms. And actually that's funny. So when we talk about like real estate and stuff, I'll talk to because their house now is worth like 1.6 million. And he paid, and it's a tract home in Fountain Valley by Mile Square Park. And, we were 3 miles from the beach.
Hindsight 2020. Why you didn't figure out a way to walk down the street and go, I'll take 5 of them.
That's what the point I was getting to is one of his friends in the 60s was like, hey, I'm going to buy up this property over here. And it was like all orange groves. My dad's like, it's all orange groves. And that guy's now like a multimillionaire real estate mogul. And my dad's like, yeah. But then my dad laughs about it. He goes, because his dad came out in the 50s and bought some property in Malibu and sold it like 5 years later for double the money and thought that he had made a fortune. And my dad's like, had he held on to that till now, that's all multi-million-dollar land. He's like, you just, it's, and my dad's always been the very safe, secure, what's the secure route going to be? He was never a real super high risk guy.
Right.
It was always, he's the guy that still has the Consumer Reports magazine delivered and is a member of Consumer Reports. And he does all of his research on something before he buys it. And, he was just always that guy. And, at 18, he taught me about compound interest. And at 18, I'm like, yeah, whatever, Dad. And now I'm like, God, why didn't I listen? Because he sat me down and you've put this much a month in, and by the time you're 40, you'll be a millionaire. And it was like, yeah, okay, Dad, I'm 18 years old and I want to sow my oats and live life. And, it's like, and now I'm like, God, what an idiot I was. Although I think we all are at that age, but
every one of us, you get to that point in your life. You're like, why didn't I because everybody is giving you advice at some point in time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I still remember I was a cadet. Wasn't even an officer yet. One of our senior guys talking to me one day. He's like, as soon as you can afford to buy a house, buy the biggest house you can afford and rent every bedroom out to your buddies. And then in a year, rent your bedroom and use the increase in value, get a loan, go buy. And it seemed so effortless the way he was explaining it.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just like, that sounds dumb.
Yeah.
And if I'd have just all those little things, max your deferred comp and leave it alone. Just
the deferred comp thing. Because I worked 3 agencies and, I never started deferred comp till I came to the sheriff's department. And, again, hindsight, there are guys I worked with when I worked Rialto PD that like had maxed their deferred comp and just had hundreds of thousands of dollars in it. And it's like, again, but you're like, I actually had a kid when I worked at Rancho, one of the deputies that worked for us. He did that. He bought a house and he actually slept in one of the walk-in closets and rented out all the other rooms. It was his house, but he's sleeping in the walk-in closet. But, I think he did exactly that. He sold that house and bought a bigger house. And, that kid's not going to have any issues when he retires.
Nope.
And it's, good. I told him, good on you. I wish when I was your age that I had thought like that, but, you're living life, you're married, you got kids, and he's single and he figured it out. So I'm like, good on you for listening. So pretty idyllic childhood.
Were you a good kid?
Yeah. Never really in trouble. Kind of that. I wasn't a jock, but I wasn't the kind of geeky nerd, or I kind of fell in the middle. All through high school, I hung out with kids from both. Like I said, I swam and played water polo. So, I had friends that were athletes and jocks, and I had friends that were, I played guitar, so I had friends that were like the heavy metal guys. I graduated I think a year before you. I was just listening to your podcast with Kelly, and he said he graduated in 86 and you graduated in 87.
Correct.
I graduated in 86. So, you had the metalheads. And so I had friends that were from that group. I had friends that were Dungeons and Dragons nerds and Star Wars nerds. So kind of, never really got in with the wrong crowd, smoked weed through most of high school, but it was weed. I grew up surfing.
Was it the weed they're smoking today?
No. Yeah. Rode my bike to the beach most days and surfed, swimming and playing water polo. Our coach would run us to the beach and we'd swim the pier and come back. So, pretty great childhood, never really got in trouble, never really did anything, probably should have gotten in trouble for some stupid things I did as a kid, but, was never really a party guy that went to the parties. And, most of the times it was hanging out with buddies, playing guitar, doing whatever. So
where'd the interest in music come from?
A couple of guys I worked with. I got a job working at Lucky Stores as a box boy. When my mom went back to being a telephone operator once we were in like high school age. And she was really good friends with all of the higher ups at corporate. So got me a job as a box boy bagging groceries at Lucky's. And a couple of the checkers that I worked with were real into music and guitar, and, got me into Stevie Ray Vaughan. And that was like, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Brian Setzer and the Stray Cats, and that I heard Stevie Ray Vaughan and was like, okay, I want to play guitar. That's what I want to do. So started playing guitar and still doing it.
I would say that Stevie Ray Vaughan could make a deaf man want to learn to play guitar.
Oh yeah, it was.
I mean, when you hear him play, it's just the fact that there's a person with that much talent.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was that was just kind of the catalyst there that was like, okay, that's what I want to do. So
were you working at Lucky while you were in high school?
Yeah, my senior year of high school.
Do you have any plan, or what were your plans coming out of high school?
I had no idea. I had no idea what I wanted to do. As a kid, I had well, I guess I shouldn't say I didn't ever get into trouble. I think when I was in grade school, I threw a dirt clod at a motor officer that was passing by.
That's always smart to do.
Yeah, yeah. And he took me home to my parents, and I was always more fearful of disappointing my parents, my dad especially, than I ever was of the police. It was, well, you can do it. You can do what you want, but Dad,
yeah.
I think,
lock me up. Don't call home.
Yeah, I think Dad only took his belt off one time. And I don't even know that he spanked me with it. He just took it off. And that was the fear of having my dad say I'm disappointed was more than a spanking ever would have been. I looked up to him so much. I never wanted to disappoint him. So that was more of but seeing that motor officer was just that, that. Oh, I'd love to do that. That would be really cool. So I think that always kind of stuck in the back of my mind, but coming out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted.
Was that your closest connection to law enforcement? That one contact?
Yeah.
No other family, friends, anything?
Nope. I can't remember any of my high school friends or anyone that had dads that were cops or any of that.
What was mom and dad pushing for you and your sisters? Was college a big topic of conversation?
College was you graduate high school, you go to college. My sister went and got my older sister's 4 years older than me. She got her degree in psychology. So she went to college, I went to college, but I didn't go to college. I was, playing guitar. I want to be a rock star, playing. And at that point, Stevie Ray Vaughan was my initial influence, but, I got into the 80s hair metal and, I had hair down to my elbows.
I was going to say back when we had hair.
Yeah. Back when I could grow it. So, yeah, was playing the clubs in Hollywood, Gazzarri's and the Whiskey and the Roxy and, playing.
So you got quite serious at it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a rock star. Yeah, like every other 18 to 20-year-old kid with a guitar. And so, but that's what I want to do. So, I was working construction jobs and, shipping, worked at a place doing shipping and packaging and stuff. And then, got into construction work. I was an electrician for a long time. I wanted to be a musician. That's what I wanted to do.
Looking back on it, was there ever a moment that you say to yourself, oh man, if we'd have just taken that opportunity, who knows, can you look back on it and see little moments that would have maybe had significant impact? Or was it just kind of never there?
I just don't think it was ever there. I mean, there's, I had some good bands and worked with some great musicians, but I just don't, I think and everyone says, oh, if you just, all these bands that actually eventually make it say, well, you just had to keep going. I just don't know that it was ever there. I mean, I was good, but I wasn't, phenomenal. I wasn't, someone hears it and goes, oh, that guy needs to be signed. I mean, I had some good bands with some cool songs and it was fun and I still play today. The band I have today is two other, now two sergeants from our department. Well, three are harmonica players. He's just made lieutenant. So, and we've played together for 10 years or so. And we do, basically charity concerts. We donate our fees to, events that we do. And when we'll play out and play bars every now and then, but, now it became a way to have that outlet and that healthy outlet of something else to do so that, you're not internalizing work and all that stuff. And, getting together with guys that are like-minded and, want to do the same thing. But yeah, it just was never really there that, okay, this is, so it got to that point. And so when I started doing electrical work and worked in that, I had met who would be my first wife, and her dad owned a neon sign company and was looking for people. So I went to work for him, and then she and I ended up getting married, renting an apartment. And, I was still, had the long hair and doing the musical thing. And it was You know, I think she was kind of one of the first ones to say, so, you know, we've been talking about having kids.
When are you going to stop playing?
What are you going to do? You know, do you want to be a sign guy, electrician? Because I worked with some older guys that, you know, had been in the sign business their whole lives, and they're broken and, you know, from climbing ladders all day long, doing, you know, neon signs and lighting, and, you know, and their knees are shot from climbing ladders, holding big transformers on their shoulders. And it's like, okay. And when I worked at Lucky's before, one of the guys I worked with there had become a police officer at Garden Grove PD, and I had gone on a couple ride-alongs with him, and I was like, man, this is really cool. So as she started saying, you know, what are you going to do? I was like, well, you know, I think I'm going to go back to school, and I'll go back and get my degree in criminal justice, and then, you know, I'll look into applying, you know, for a law enforcement job, because, you know, good career, kind of a calling that, you know, that, yeah, you're an electrician, you're going and doing electrical work. Okay, well, what positive effect am I having on the world? What am I giving back? I'm going and, yeah, okay, I fixed your sign for your business so that it lights up. Okay, cool. But what net positive am I having in the long run? So it's like, you know, this is what I want to do. I want to have something that's more of a calling, that's more of a, you know, I can give back. And so I started going to National University to get my criminal justice degree. And while there, one of my instructors was John Hewitt, Rocky Hewitt, who was the assistant sheriff for Orange County Sheriff's Department. And in going through classes, he was like, why are you going to wait to graduate? Just come and apply. So I was like, you think? And he's like, yeah, come apply. And I don't know how much he had to do with it, but the hiring process went like, just from the day I took the written test to the academy was maybe 4 months, 5 months. And my written test day, there were 1,000 people showed up for the written test. I mean, it was law enforcement then was.
I was going to say, what is this, mid-90s?
So yeah, 94. So I started the academy in August of 94. So I think it was like January or February of 94 that I started the process, and was in the August academy, starting in August. So, I mean, it went really quick, but it was, you know, competition for jobs then was, you know, I had applied at LAPD, but that was right when they had their whole consent decree that they had to hire, you know, certain percentages of different ethnicities and races. And I maxed my written and my oral. And the guy, when he called me, he said, yeah, you're not even on the list. He said, you know, if you had military, an extra 5% would put you at about 180 on the list. And I was like, okay, it is what it is. And
was military ever something you even considered?
No. You know, I said I wanted to be a rock star, and I never even really thought about it. And so and it was never pushed. You know, my dad was National Guard when he was, you know, in his 20s, but, you know, he did his stint and, you know, got out. And so it was never really a thing that was, you know, anyone really in the family. None of my grandparents were military. So there was never really, you know, that history of that in the family.
Was your dad basically kind of right in between Korea and Vietnam, or was he more the Korean era?
So he was born in 37, so 3 years before World War II. So he was probably, I would say probably Korea. He was,
or maybe like just in that bubble, after Korea, and
just in that bubble that he just missed Korea, but was
right.
A little too old for Vietnam. So he just kind of fell right in there. Because my wife now, she was born in 75, and her dad was in Vietnam. Because she's about that,
right,
you know, 7-8 years younger, and her dad fell into that era. So, you know, military was just never a thing for our family. It was never really talked about. So, like I said, I was adopted, so, you know, didn't find my birth family until I was 40. I found them, but, you know, growing up, I knew, my parents told me as soon as I could, I've known I was adopted as long as I can remember. You know, they took me into the bedroom and said, hey, we want to let you know you were, and I was like, okay, can I go play? You're my mom and dad. You raised me, and that's, you know, and that's, you know, and that's, my mom had a problem with that when I found my birth family, that, you know, she was like, is he like, we didn't do it. And it's like, no, it was, I've got kids now. And there's, you know, every time I fill out a medical questionnaire,
what's your history?
Is there a family history of cancer? Is there a family history of this? And it was more, you know, and it's one of those things when I found my birth family, it's like, oh, I hit the cosmic lottery with my parents. I mean, not that, not that they ended up being like my biological father I've got 4 half siblings from him, but he lived in Chino Hills, which was like, here I'm living in Hesperia, and it's like he lives in Chino Hills. But, he worked for a company that made, and he was a pretty high up in the company and, very, very successful living as an adult. But, most all of the other kids ended up, drugs, and because he was never there, he was always, off earning. And my biological mom, grew up so they were, I think he was 15 and she was 16 when they had me, or the other way around. So, and in the 60s, you didn't have kids out of wedlock.
Right.
So luckily for me, they put me up for adoption. And like I said, I hit the cosmic lottery with my parents. So, that all worked out. So, but life takes funny twists and turns. So, and here I end up as a cop, and it's funny because a lot of people I went to high school with were like, cop, really? It's like, yeah, no, this is my calling. So like I said, the hiring process went super quick, started the academy in August, and, I think I was 26 when I started the academy, life experience wise, the academy really wasn't that hard. I mean, some of the physical stuff, I played water polo and swam. So, I was in relatively good shape, and the yelling stuff, it's like, the first day when you hear them in the back stroking and joking with each other, you're like, okay, this is all a game. And if you go into it knowing it's a game and you play the game, it really, the yelling and stuff was never a big deal.
But back then, the early 90s, Orange County still had a reputation of probably being the toughest academy in Southern California.
That was the reputation was that it was the hardest academy in the state. And, but it was still, I think it's just like boot camp or whatever it is. If you go in knowing that, okay, there's a set of rules here that I have to play by, and you play by those rules and don't buck the system, you get through it. My nephew's he's a Marine. He went through his, boot camp, and like, that's all he wanted to do was be a soldier. And he ended up being a recon Marine, got accepted to the Naval Academy, graduated the Naval Academy, and now he's about to go back to recon as an officer. But he was like, same thing, going to recon, going to boot camp. He's like, these are the rules. This is what they want you to do. Shut your mouth, do what they want you to do. And it's really
real novel concept.
Yeah, it's really not that hard. It's the ones that draw all the attention are the ones that want to buck the system. And for me, being 26, going into the academy, it was, I've got a little bit of
You're an old man.
I got a little bit of experience under my belt. So, it really, the academy wasn't too hard. Academically, I was always real good. So, the academic side of things was really never an issue for me. So that breezed through. Got hired and ended up stopping college. So went back, got my degree at 40, my bachelor's degree at 40. And then I got my master's at 43, in the pipeline to, the whole, I want to promote. So if I can make myself more promotable,
right,
and get more. And then I'm about halfway through a doctorate, but I kind of put that aside when I retired, because what am I going to do with the doctorate and
go teach
criminal justice leader? Well, I was already teaching. So I spent almost a decade at Victor Valley College teaching law enforcement. Then I was the post coordinator running their academies there. So, so really it was, okay, do I want to get a doctorate and go be a college professor? Not in 2024 college.
But going back to 1994, so you're still relatively close to the Rodney King riots. You say you want to sign up and be a cop. What did mom and dad say?
They were fine with it.
No apprehension.
No pushback at all. And my wife at the time, same thing. So when we got married, the first apartment we lived in was in Hawthorne. So we were living in Hawthorne, and, commuting to her dad's sign company was in Artesia off the 605 and 91. So, we'd commute there. But when the Rodney King riots kicked off, it was like in our neighborhood, because we were off of Prairie and Rosecrans. So, I mean, there was right at the end of our street of our apartment building, there was a Blockbuster video that was getting looted as, I was driving home that night, and it was, holy crap, stuff's going down. So it was, we were right in the middle of all that. And that kind of all of that kind of influenced that, I want to be involved in this. I want to, and that was, going through the academy. And then it was the same thing with PR-24 batons and learning the right way to strike and all that. And you're like,
put the PR-24 down if you're good. Is the right way to strike with one.
Exactly. Get rid of it. So, but yeah, no, so that's that coming up in that area and then in that era. And then, the North Hollywood bank shootout and, all of that. And I think that caused a little more consternation for family. They were like, are you sure that you want to be doing what you're doing? And
were you still in the jail when that happened? Because that was 97.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in the intake release center. So I did 3 years with Orange County Sheriff's Department. So I got hired there, did 3 years there. And then the house that we had bought in Santa Ana, our first house that we had bought together, we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't really talk to our parents. We're adults. We can buy a house. We can do this. And we got into a mortgage loan that our realtor, this is, and it was like a 30 due in 3. So there was a balloon payment at the end of 3 years. Well, then, that was the first time the housing market collapsed. And all of a sudden, our interest, we had an adjustable rate loan and our payment went up like $600. And it's like for, my wife at the time was a teacher, but she had left the school in LA she was teaching at and took a job at a private school because she was pregnant with our son. So our first son was born while I was in the academy. So she had taken a job at a private school that wasn't paying, a whole lot. And, I'm a brand new deputy sheriff making decent money, but not, anything crazy. And her parents had bought a house out in Silver Lakes out towards Barstow, and they were about to move to Vegas. So they said, hey, if you want to just take over payments on our house, then you guys can move here. And, stupid me not thinking the commute from Silver Lakes, Barstow to Santa Ana 5 days a week because we worked 5/8. But we moved out there, the house payment was $800 a month. And, we were on the 9th green of the golf course. Like association dues were $80 a month and all the golf you could play. So I was like, and I grew up playing golf with my mom. My mom probably could have played professional golf. She was that good.
Oh, wow.
She was club champion at Mile Square Park and she was a phenomenal golfer. So I grew up, playing golf with her. So the ability to live on a course and stuff was like, okay, this could be cool. But
how did she come to play golf? What makes that interesting for me, because you talked about how your mom and dad grew up, the Depression era.
Yeah.
They moved out here. What brings her from that to golf?
I think just her friends group.
Oh, okay.
The friends, the social circle that she had gotten into when they bought the house. And Mile Square Park was literally, you could walk to Mile Square Park from our house.
And she just took to it like a fish to water?
Took to it like a fish to water. Well, she was extremely athletic in high school. She was captain of the cheerleading team. She was, always played sports, tennis, and was very athletic. So I think it's one of those things. She just had that gene for athletics and, and took to that. I started playing golf probably at 6 or 7. So, grew up playing. And so the ability to live on the course was like, okay, I can get into this. Well, then driving from, it was 100 miles each way. So,
especially coming off Graveyard or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Working 5/8. And it was, that's ultimately what led to me lateraling to Rialto was, I totaled 2 cars falling asleep at the wheel. So one, I was almost home and drifted across the center divider in Oro Grande and caught the back of an I-beam coming off the back of a water truck and ripped the entire side of the car down. And then about 6 months later, I fell asleep on a clover leaf on a over freeway interchange and rolled down the interchange. And it was like, okay, well, it's probably time to get closer to home. So one of the guys I worked with at the sheriff's department, his wife's best friend's husband, if that makes sense, was a sergeant at Rialto PD. So I went and talked to him and did some ride-alongs there and was like, okay, cool. This is only, 30 minutes from home as opposed to an hour and a half from home. And so I lateraled there because I had thought about going to the sheriff's department because, that's who handled the whole high desert where
San
we were
Bernardino.
living. Yeah. So I was like, but I was so sick of the jail, 3 years in the jail. And at the time, Orange County SO, I don't know if you remember, was 8 to 10 years in the jail before you went to patrol.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because that was going to be my question, because I know when I went through the academy in LA County, they were telling the deputies to anticipate at minimum 6 years.
Yeah. Well, in Orange County at the time too, if you remember, while I was in the academy, the county went bankrupt.
Yes.
So, and one of the guys in my academy class, his mom was actually the CEO of the county at the time. So he was telling us, look, because we were all panicked, man, they're going to lay us off. We're going to lose our jobs. We're the bottom of and he said, no, look, they're not going to lay off deputies and cops. They'll work it out. But, but that like dramatically slowed down. So when I started in the jail, they were like, yeah, it's 8 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And then they had a thing at the time going on where they had FTOs that were like having contests to see who could fail the most trainees and roll them back to the jail. So it was like, even if you made it to training, you know, they had FTOs that were intentionally trying to roll people up to, you know, which culture at times, you know, that gig. But
the games that get played.
Yeah. So when I went to lateral, it was like, I had talked to some people up here and they were like, yeah, it's about 3 years to go to patrol. And I was like, man, that would put me 6 years in the jail. I don't want to do another 3 years in the jail. So to be able to go to Rialto and just go straight to patrol was kind of the, yeah, I'm going to do that. And then that, you know, growing up in Huntington Beach, Fountain Valley, that was some culture shock. Going from there to Rialto in the mid 90s was, holy moly. It was a whole different world.
No beaches and surfboards in Rialto?
No. And a lot more gangs and dope. And, you know, it was drinking from a fire hose that, you know, cause, you know, growing up or, you know, even going on some ride-alongs when I was in the jail in Orange County, when you're in South County, you know, someone calls in, hey, there's a African-American walking around my neighborhood. Okay, what's he doing? Well, he's just in my neighborhood. Yeah, that's not a crime. That's, you know, but that's the type of stuff. It was, right. You know, my neighbor's sprinklers are on and got my car wet and left water spots. And it's like, really? This is what law enforcement is? So going to Rialto, it was like, you know, it was, you know, the East Jacksons at the time were going off with blood and Crip gangs. And there were shootings every night and, you know, man gun calls all day long, you know, priority one calls just, and this is the old MDTs. You remember the little green screen and you can only have like 5 pages open at a time. And, you know, so you're scrolling through calls and it's, you know, all priority one calls and, you know, shootings and stabbings and dope calls. And, you know, going up in those neighborhoods, any car that you T-stopped, you know, when you shook the car down was going to have dope or a gun in it. So it was just going from where I grew up to that was like a, holy moly, this is a different world. This is a lot of fun. And, you know, a place like that, you learn how to be a cop really quick because it's either, you either learn or it's going to chew you up and spit you out. And so it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun in those initial years at Rialto.
Were you thinking at that time that you were just going to finish out your career at Rialto?
Yeah. That's what I figured. I had some phenomenal supervisors. I think I told you Terry Tassone that I worked with, that you ended up working with at the DA's office. You know, one of the best supervisors I ever had, one of the best mentors I ever had, took care of his people, was a no BS guy. I mean, if you stepped over the line, he would let you know. And that's as a new officer, I kind of had a tone in my voice one time with him and he stepped up in my face and went nose to nose and had his pointy finger out. And that guy scared the living crap out of me. But it set me on the straight and narrow. And I mean, I respect that guy like so much. And I had some great supervisors. And then the department went through a phase where they brought in a chief and a deputy chief that had a lot of corruption in their past and in their, even in what they were doing there at Rialto and the hiring practices. We lost, and it was that period where Batani left, Tassone,
everybody jumped ship.
There was probably 25 guys left in a year, and they're left in that first year of that chief's tenure. And, you know, of course, that chief's response to that was, well, they're racist and they can't handle working for an African-American chief, and that's why they want to leave. Well, no, it's because you're bringing in policies and doing things that are contrary to what our mission should be. And then I hurt my back. I herniated 2 discs in my back fighting with a suspect, and was out almost a year, you know, and that was kind of the first time where I really was kind of like, you know, this talk of we're a family kind of like was like, okay, well, in that almost year that I was out, I got one phone call from anyone in the department, and it was my SWAT sergeant saying, hey, I need the serial number off your sniper rifle. And it was like, and then at the end of the call, it was, oh, hey, yeah, and by the way, how you doing? You know, and it was like, it was kind of that, okay, I'm a number. I'm just a number. And, you know, as soon as I'm gone, they're going to fill my spot. I came back to work. And when I came back, I was a motor and like I said, on SWAT, and I came back, and when I came back,
that's almost as bad as me being a computer guy on SWAT.
Right. So I came back, and, you know, I had let them know, hey, my doctor's finally cleared me. I'm coming back. I'll be back at my shift and on this date. And they said, oh, no, you're not going to be a motor anymore. You're going back to patrol. What shift do you want? And I said, well, I don't think you can just take me out of a special assignment because I was injured. well, no, your time would have passed by the time you were out. So we're pulling you out.
Motor's rotational at
no,
Rialto?
it wasn't.
Oh.
It never was.
Oh.
So I was like, because the other motors there had been
It's that
there.
chapter in the book where we can apply new rules.
Right. So it was because the other motors had been on their bikes for decades. And it was like, okay. And they said, so what shift do you want? And I said, okay, well, I have my kids Tuesday through Friday. So by this time, my first wife and I had divorced. And I had the kids Tuesday through Friday every week. So I was like, okay, well, I want to work, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday day shift or Graves, whatever it is. But those, I need Tuesday through Friday off. Or no, I'm sorry. I asked for weekends. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So because I have my kids during the week. Because my ex-wife, she was a teacher, so she had weekends off. So, I would work weekends. So the way the child exchange would work, 50-50, so I worked weekends. So I asked for weekends.
Filling a weekend shift should have been
correct. No one wants
hard to fill.
Right. Yeah. Day shift weekends. Who wants to work day shift or graveyard weekends? So I'm like, okay, well, just give me weekend days or graves, whatever. So I have the week off for my custody stuff. And the sergeant calls me back a little while later and says, hey, those are your needs according to the deputy chief. Needs of the department need to be filled. So we're going to put you on. They had a cover shift that was Thursday day shift, Friday swing shift, and Saturday graveyard. And I was like, all right, copy that. So whatever. So I came back and about 6-7 months in, got in a fight with a guy again, rejacked my back up. Doctor put me off. And I was at home and IA sergeant shows up at my door. Hey, here's your notice. You need to be back at work on Monday. And I said, my doctor has me off. Well, according to the captain, either you're back at work on Monday, working the front counter, or we're going to start termination proceedings for insubordination. And at that point, I was so disillusioned and bitter about the process and the way that, things were being run that I was like, screw this. I don't need this crap.
How many years in are you at that point with Rialto?
9 going on 10.
Do you think that, or is your perception, or maybe you actually know this, that you were perceived as the old guard that they just wanted to push out with this new chief and their new regime?
Looking back on it, maybe. The ones that bought in and drank the Kool-Aid flourished and promoted through the ranks. And, I was never a yes man. I've always been a do the right thing for the right reason. And, and at that point, when I was going through my divorce and some of my stuff with my ex-wife and going through that stuff, I abused sick time. I called in sick a bunch. There was stuff going on at home and I was just like, yeah, I'm not going to work. And, and that also kind of got into, some of where some of the bitterness came from, because I was having some health issues with all the stress and the anxiety and the stuff going on with the marriage. And I never talked about it with anyone. It was, like we do as cops, we stuff that 20 pounds of shit into the 5-pound bag and keep cramming it down. So I was having gastro issues and stomach issues. And, there was a Halloween, I called in sick on Halloween and was actually transported by ambulance to the hospital. Well, the one female lieutenant that, never should have pushed not that female, it was just this one happened to, she's another one of the worst supervisors I ever worked for. She actually called around all the hospitals in the high desert looking for me to make sure that I was actually sick. And, and then it was, my wife goes over to the phone in the hospital and, my wife at the time goes over to the phone and she's like, oh, it's Lieutenant so-and-so. She wants to, and she's like, oh, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. And it's like, well, I talked to my buddies in the station. They were all, yeah, she was ranting like he's faking this and this. Right. And the ones that lived in the high desert, she's asking them what hospitals are up there that I can call and find out that he's not there. And so it was just that whole, it was never, they preached that whole family thing that we're a family and we got your back until you need something. And then it's, sorry, we don't have manpower for that, or we don't have this. But I abused my sick time. I mean, I burned all my sick time, and that's, people would joke saying when people would take a day off, they'd say, oh, he's taking a snow day, so, and, whatever, we talk shit to each other, but, and that's kind of the reputation I kind of got. And, and that's on me. I own that I'm the one that called in sick. I'm the one that, was like, I'm going through shit and I don't need that shit. There was enough, and it was already at kind of that point where, the way the department was going. It was just that I was starting to develop that bitterness and that, and that's on me too, but it got to that point when they sent that letter and I was just like, yeah, screw this. I'm done. You send IA to my house and you're ordering me back to work when I'm on Percocet and you want me to drive. Well, we'll figure out a way to get you there. Then you want me to sit at the front counter with a gun on my hip and contact and interact with the public. Well, it's you're either going to do that and it was like Monday through Thursday. And it's like, I have my kids through the week. Well, that's not our problem. And so that night I typed up a letter and faxed it to the chief and resigned and said, F this, I'm done. And then it took him a month to call me and ask for my sniper rifle and my gear. And so it was like, and I was just so bitter and disillusioned that I had talked to so by this point I remarried. My wife was a dispatcher with our department, with the sheriff's department. And we had met because she contracted at Rialto as a contract dispatcher. So that's where we had initially met. And, then we ended up getting married and I talked to her and she was still dispatching. She was like, we'll just put everything on my insurance. And I had started doing some woodworking, building cabinets. And I had a friend that hit me up and was like, hey, I know you're doing this woodworking. Do you think you could build me cabinets for the house I bought? And I was like, they're just boxes with doors. Can't be that hard. So that kind of, we started with that and we had started doing some cabinet stuff. And I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to go full time as a cabinet maker and become a full time. The housing market was booming then. It was, people were building spec homes all over the place. So I was like, screw this. So I got a lawyer for, all my work comp stuff and all that stuff. And I think it took like 7 years to get a settlement from Rialto on that. But it was just one of those things that I was over it. And then about 2.5 years later, and in the meantime, I still had my friends that worked at Rialto, and in the meantime, Sergio Carrera, the Rialto SWAT officer, was shot and killed in a search warrant, and he had been one of my trainees in traffic, and my best friend Carl was on that op and was there when it happened, and so we had gone to their house right after the shooting and after he was killed. And, so there was still kind of that tie there. And it's like, in that time, I started to get the fire back and, okay, maybe I'm not done. And, I do actually kind of miss the job and miss, the camaraderie and and in the meantime, my wife had quit the sheriff's department, and came and helped me run the business full time. Cause, it was doing really well. And, she wanted to be home. Our kids were at that age where when we got married, our kids were 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we had, she had 2 and I had 2, but they were all real young. So it was that age where she was like, I'd like to be home to be there for the kids and to be able to, take them to things. And, they're not like us children of the 80s that were latchkey kids. So she had retired or resigned, and she did almost 12 years as a dispatcher. Which when we start talking about stuff like resilience and some of that stuff, it's having someone who knew the job at home to talk to, really helped keep my head on straight a lot of years. But so she had come home and was helping me run the business. And right about that time, I think right around 2008 when the housing market kind of tanked again. And, in the meantime, like I said, Chris Emmons, mm-hmm. Chris's husband, John, was actually in backgrounds and training at the time, in employee resources. And that's the first time I met him. He called me just out of the blue and was like, hey, why don't you put in an application to the sheriff's department? I have some mutual friends that know you and said that you're looking at getting back into law enforcement and we need people. So, why don't you apply? So I was like, oh, okay. So, and it was like kind of our business was slowing down in the housing market. And it was like, yeah, maybe this is the right thing. And I do miss it. So I applied, and again, the process went lickety split. And that was probably January of 2007. I applied and was in the jail August 4th of 2008 or 2007.
Were you out long enough that they made you go back through like one of the post recertification courses?
No, I was only out. It was right about 2 years. So 3 years is where you have to recert. So it was about 2 years that I was out. So it started back and, back in the jail, did 19 months in the jail. And it was funny being back in the jail after doing almost 10 years of patrol in Rialto, because you got kids fresh out of the academy that, oh, I can't wait to go to patrol, and oh my God, the jail sucks, and this. It's like, calm down.
It ain't that bad in here.
Yeah, it's not that bad, and you learn how to talk to people. There's a lot of stuff now looking back that the jails taught me that were a big benefit. Even when I got into Rialto, I realized that learning how to talk to parolees and learning how to talk to people that are of the criminal element, you learn how to talk to them. You learn how to have conversations. You don't need to fight everyone, and that's something I always tried to pass on to, my younger troops. And even as an FTO, even as just especially as a deputy sergeant, and, I went to patrol in Victorville, and at that point that was 07. That I was 36, 37, coming up on 40. And it's like, so, I've got a lot of experience. So it's like, hey, you don't need to fight everyone. You're going to end your career early. Learn how to talk to people. So I credit the jail a lot with that and learning how to talk to people. I've
always thought you put a man or a woman through the academy, you teach them to be a cop, but then you put them in the jail for 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. I always thought, send them out, get them through patrol school, make sure that they can be a good patrol cop.
Right.
And then it's just part of the process. Hey, at the 2-year mark, you're going to go back in. That's when you're going to go into the jail.
Right.
You've learned enough about working the streets. Now utilize this time, like you said, to really be a learning experience to make you a better cop.
Well, and I really thought that was a big issue that like Orange County had with, if you got a guy that's in the jail for 8 to 10 years before he goes to patrol, that guy doesn't remember anything from the academy about being and even 3 years, leaving there and going to Rialto. It was, getting in the car as an in the FTO program, 3 years out of the academy. Yeah, I've dealt with, inmates and whatever, and at that point I was 29. So, I'm a full grown adult, 29 years old, thinking, and same thing, you're going there and you're being treated as the boot. And it's like back to, okay, this is the game. I get into the locker room and out before anyone else shows up to dress up. I'm in the briefing room before anyone else. I'm sitting in the front row. Okay, we'll play the game. It's no big deal. I know the game, but it's that you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And, even coming from the jail, yeah, I've talked to inmates and, hey, how do you commit your crimes? How do you do this? And I had a lot of knowledge, but practical knowledge wasn't there. You've forgotten so much of the doing a T-stop. And I mean, it's learning everything. So yeah, from that aspect, it could be a big downside.
Were you looking to get right back onto motors as quickly as you could when you got on with the sheriff's department?
I love traffic. So, as a motor in Rialto, I did, I think, almost 5 years as a motor in Rialto. Won a bunch of MAT awards, went through recon school and was a mate guy and handled a bunch of fatals, and that stuff really interested me, the reconstruction stuff and the math physics, which is funny because in high school you're like, I'm never going to use math. And then, recon's all math and physics. And it was like, this is cool stuff. You can prove this guy was going this fast just off skid marks and damage to the car and where they ended up after the collision. And so that was always interested me. So yeah, I wanted to go back into traffic.
Well, as a quick side note, I mean, the backbone of this podcast is preparing for your transition. And the one job that cops have the opportunity to do and learn that is marketable when you leave, accident reconstruction.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a lucrative profession post law enforcement?
Absolutely. And that was part of my plan was, okay, I have this skill, and then, when I'm done, I can market this skill, because it can be, some of those guys make $300-400 an hour doing recon stuff, and it can be extremely lucrative. And I was good. And that can sound like tooting my own horn, but I developed a lot of programs with the sheriff's department, and that's one of my legacies that I'm proud of is my mate stuff. I became the go-to guy at the sheriff's department for mate stuff. So that's one of my legacies that I'm proud of. But yeah, so going into patrol, that was kind of I'd like to get back on the bike. I'd like to get back into traffic. I eventually wanted to promote because I'm later in life by the time I start at the sheriff's department. So, it's like, okay, well, if I want to promote and maximize my retirement, I've got to promote pretty quickly because I don't have a lot of years left. I'm about 15 years in at this point, so what am I going to do? So, it was, you got to be a deputy 3 years before you can promote. So it's like, okay, I did a year and a half in the jail, got to Victorville, was doing my patrol time there. And I think I promoted to corporal right at about 4 years with the sheriff's department. And then I think I did 4 or 5 years as a detective and promoted to sergeant. So, but I got to do a ton of, that's the thing about the sheriff's department, is there's so many things you can do and places you can go. So, I started in Victorville as a patrol deputy, became a motor there and did the mate stuff. And then I basically continued the mate stuff throughout the rest of my career. So when I promoted to detective, I went to I went to the SED to SWAT first. At 40 something years old, SWAT was a lot harder than it was when I was 25. And by that point, John Emmons John had been, when I started at Victorville, John was a sergeant there. And the first funny story, the first day I walk into Victorville for my first patrol shift, I'm like this, I've been sleeved for years, and he's standing at the end of a hallway and he yells out at the top of his lungs, "Hey, pick a fucking side." And I like looked at him and I'm like, and I recognized him. I'm like, I thought I had. And so, from that point on, we became the best of friends, and I love that guy. But so he became traffic sergeant when I went into traffic, and John was one of those guys, when he sat me down, when I came into traffic, he said, "Look, this is a family. I know from my whole career, I know you hear that a lot, and it's not always exhibited. But when I say family comes first, I mean family comes first." And he's like, if you've got, I don't care if it's a day at Disneyland with the kids, if you have something that you need to do with your family, you have the time. And I mean, which was also kind of nice being in traffic, that you don't have kind of the manpower issues that you have in patrol. But even as a patrol sergeant, he kind of took that tact, and he would hold people over or get people to come in on overtime to, and he lived it every day. And to this day, one of the best supervisors I've ever worked for. He had his issues in his career because he's another guy that never shut his mouth. And if he thought something was wrong, he didn't care who you were. He was going to tell you, but took care of his people and was just a huge example to me of what a leader is. You take care of your people. That's your job.
Isn't it kind of funny? The men and women who are the most vocal tend to be the ones who take care of their people the best.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
They're the first to ruffle feathers, but they're also the first to make sure that their people are being taken care of.
Yeah, no, 100%. And there was one point where my wife and I were in Vegas, and she had what they thought was a stroke, a TIA. And she was in the hospital there. And like, when John found out, it was, "Hey, can I get 40 King to come pick you guys up and fly you here? What do you need?" I mean, it didn't matter that it wasn't work related or anything else. It was, "Hey, my wife is in a medical crisis. What can I do for you?" And that example that was set by him was one of those things that, hey, this is the example I have to live up to. And, so that for me was like, you live it. You're not just, lip service. "Hey, we're a family." And then when you say, "Hey, I've got family coming out from here. Can I get the night off?" Manpower wise, we're just a little short, and we're not going to be able to do that. And it was, everyone always seemed to tell you were family, but he actually lived that example. And it probably cost him in his career a few times, but he didn't care, because at the end of the day, you can look in the mirror and say, "I did the right thing." And I think at the end of the day, that's what we have. You got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, whether I took punishment or discipline for that, I did the right thing. And he lived every bit of that. So yeah, I went to work for him, as a motor in traffic. And then he eventually got promoted to lieutenant and left, and, worked for some other good supervisors, promoted out of I went to the acting detective spot, and then promoted out of the acting detective spot. Then went to SED, went to SWAT. And by that time, John was the lieutenant of narcotics. So he was like, "Hey, I see this is beating on you, old man. Do you want to come over and work narcs?" So he brought me from SED over to narcs. And so I spent a couple years working our meth task force, and then went into Sandcat, which is our auto theft task force.
There's meth in San Bernardino County?
No.
Oh, okay. So you're working out of county cases.
Yeah. Just San Diego County. So,
one case a year, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. And so you really got to write slow to work that stuff out. So then went to SANCAT, which is San Bernardino County Auto Theft Task Force, and worked auto theft for about 2 years. And then I promoted to sergeant out of there. That was a great gig too. We ran out of San Bernardino PDs where our office was, and watching those guys work, man, those guys get hammered. So that was a fun city to work out of, because same thing. They're like Rialto was when I came in the 90s. Every call was a priority one call, shots fired all day long. And so that was a good gig. Promoted to sergeant out of there, and went, instead of going back to the jail, I went to our administrative support unit, which basically handles all of the policy for the jail, all the policy writing and all of that stuff. So
did you get the opportunity to pick, or was it just?
No, it was just the sheriff called me and said, this is where you're going. Like a lot of departments, when you promote, basically you go. And that's, I know when you were talking to Kelly about CHP, like basically you go where they tell you to go. And, San Bernardino County is 20,000 square miles. They try and keep you close to home. They never do freeway therapy if you're bad, but they try and keep you close to home. But
they never do it. But the fact that there's the term freeway therapy.
Right. Yeah. When you live in the high desert and somehow you end up working Morongo or needles. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sure it happens. But, so most people go back to the jail when they get promoted, unless you're in some specialty assignment. There's some guys like SED promote in place and eventually end up getting transferred out. But so I went to the administrative support unit spot, and it was just a captain, lieutenant, me, and then 10 employees. So went in there, and it was kind of just building on those things that I had learned from John and from Terry. And, cause I went in there, they had a real fractured, because there was 4 deputies and then the rest were civilian employees. And there was a real fractured dynamic between the civilian employees and the safety employees. It was, we're the deputies and what we say goes. And, the civilian employees are like, well, we're the ones that are doing all the legwork here. And, and that's my first week. I sat them all down and said, no, we are a team. We are going to do stuff together. And if you don't like that, then you're out. I'll get you transferred wherever you want to go, but you're not going to be here. And was able to build a real cohesive unit there. The captain that was there at the time wasn't a real favored person within the department. He ended up being absentee captain. I rarely saw him, if ever. And then he took a federal job somewhere and moved to San Diego. And then the lieutenant that I had, they ended up transferring him out. So I was acting lieutenant and captain, and got to kind of build the division to, what I thought it should be, which who knows if that was right or not, but, was able to build a real cohesive team that, that worked together. And it was kind of that, okay, these things that I've learned along the way actually work. The take care of your people and they'll take care of you, that whole kind of servant leadership kind of thing. And it's not taught a lot of leadership over the last few years. And it's that whole, it's not that authoritarian thing. I mean, you're going to do it because I'm the sergeant. It's, hey, I'll come in and take the trash out. It's, that's not anyone's job. We are a team here. Yeah. I've been put in this position that ultimately the buck stops with me, and I'm going to take, whatever rolls back downhill is going to hit me, but we're a team. And if you take care of your people, they're going to take care of you. Yeah. You're going to get the outlier here and there that's gaming the system and whatever. But, I read when I went through, I think it was probably before I went through SLI, I had read Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. And in that book, he says, leadership's not about being in charge. It's about taking care of the people in your charge. And that hit home huge. And that was one of those things that I think everything comes back to. If you take care of your people are going to take care of you. It's not rocket science.
It really isn't.
It's not. People make leadership out to be this huge, complicated thing. Are you born with it? Can you develop it? Just take care of your people. Yeah, there's admin stuff and other stuff that you're going to have to do in a leadership position, but having those stripes or those bars on your collar don't make you a leader. It gives you a position of authority, but it doesn't make you a leader. And I think that's lost on so many people. And that, and then that kind of, dovetails into, the end of my career and why I decided to retire when I did. Because, so from there, I went to work Rancho Cucamonga as the traffic. Well, I went as a patrol sergeant, but I was brought there ostensibly to end up being the traffic sergeant. So throughout all of my stuff, I remained a mate supervisor. So as soon as I promoted to detective, they made me a mate supervisor. So
you kept that as a collateral assignment?
Yeah. So we have station mate teams and we had regional mate teams. So the regional mate teams will cover, like, if there's a collision involving a deputy at a station, that station's mate team wouldn't handle it, the regional team would, and then the regional team handles the unincorporated, all the unincorporated areas. So rolled the needles a bunch of times for fatals out in needles. But so I maintained that collateral duty throughout my career. So even as a detective, even as a sergeant at the jail, I was still a mate supervisor. So then one of my best friends was the captain at Rancho, and he was like, hey, would you be, I know you live in the desert, but would you, we've got some issues with traffic and we don't have a lot of experienced people that could be, and Rancho's the largest station for traffic. At one time there was like 11 motors. So at the time I went to Rancho, there was 21 traffic deputies. So
why so many traffic out of Rancho? Is it just because it's the nice area of?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the most well-funded city in San It's the crown jewel of San Bernardino County and the most well-funded.
Yeah.
And it's a big city. So traffic.
Oh, and it's exploded.
Yeah.
The last 15, 20 years.
Yeah. So traffic's a huge issue. So it's always had a huge, and Captain Mahoney, who was my good friend Donnie, he had been a motor at Rancho and was now the captain there, and was like, we don't have a lot of experienced supervisors that could run a big traffic division. Would you be interested? I know you live up the hill, but would you be interested in coming down? And so, yeah, absolutely. And Donnie's another one of those, like John, Donnie's that supervisor that you take care of your people, and everyone that's ever worked for him would tell you that, because that's what he's done no matter where he went. He's gone into places that had absolutely screwed up cultures and completely turned the culture around just by treating his people well and treating them like they matter and listening to them. Like I said, it's may not be easy, but it's simple.
What gets frustrating is we hear it a lot, and there's nobody sitting in any law enforcement agency today that hasn't heard that. Just take care of your people. But inevitably, you end up with, and it's not just, I've had the opportunity to see the other side of the fence, the private sector side. It's the same way. There are so many people that are in a position of rank that are doing it to feed their ego.
100%.
And the one thing is as soon as you have to tap the stripes on your sleeves or the bar on your collar, you may think that you're enforcing your control. All you're doing is losing more control.
100%. And it goes to when I worked at Victor Valley College, it was the same. I mean, you're working with people who have PhDs that think just what they say goes because I'm a doctor or I have a doctorate. Well, one, you're not a doctor. You have a PhD in education. But two, you don't know the real world. And they're coming in and telling us what we have to do with post. And it's like, if you don't want to have a post program anymore, then we'll do what you say, because post is the ultimate authority, and we'll say you don't have a program anymore. Well, I have a PhD. Once you told me you had a PhD, you just told me that you don't have a leg to stand on. Right. Because you're going back to that positional power
because I said
authority, because I said so. And it's like, I don't care. I'm working on a doctorate. I know all it is putting in the time. Yeah, there's some work to it, but it doesn't suddenly bestow upon you this, you have a PhD. My ex-wife has a PhD. I told her once, what are you going to stand up if someone asks for a doctor in a movie theater, you're going to stand up and say, I'm here? What are you going to tell the person? Don't start a sentence with a preposition? I mean, come on. So yeah, that whole like power aspect of ego and, I've got to be the one in charge. It's like, at the end of the day, I never cared who got the credit. Are we successful? Is our team successful? Do people say, hey, if you need something, go to those guys. They're the ones that can help you. And that's always been, and that goes back to my dad. That was always that, be the person with the most knowledge, but be the one that gives all that knowledge away. It was always, he always taught me, never hoard what you know, share what you know. And I think people get that, well, I have this little niche of information and everyone's got to come to me for it, because if I tell other people, then they might get the credit. And it's like, ultimately, it just makes you look like a huge douche.
All it is
and no one comes to you and asks for help, because man, that guy's ego. And it's like, if you know it, give it away.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, what's your legacy going to be? It's going to be, and that's like Donnie, when he retired, as a captain out of Rancho, it's like, I give that guy so much credit and so much props for all the things that he mentored me on and helped me with my career. And it's like the legacy of people that he left behind with those attributes, what's the magnitude of order down the line? Because those people that he's influenced that have passed that on to people under them. You know, it's him to me. Then when I was in traffic, my corporal is now a sergeant, and I passed down those traits to him, and, you know, he took those and ran with them. And, you know, so, and now he's a sergeant, and who's he passing those on to? So it's, you know, when we talk legacy, it's not, I don't really look at legacy as like, people are going to say, oh, James Snow, he was the greatest and this and that. It's down the line. How many people are positively influenced because of the things I did early, you know, when I was a supervisor, that I took that when I actually said, I'm not going to forget where I came from. And I actually put those things in practice, that I'm going to take care of my people. And I always tried to take care of my people. And if you need something, you know, when I became a traffic sergeant, I told my guys the same thing John told me. You know, I wrote them a introduction letter, and these are my beliefs. I don't care if you fail. If you fail, if you don't fail, you're not trying. If you fail, we're going to sit down, we'll talk about it. You learn from it and you move forward. You know, the whole fail forward thing, but it's like, I don't care if you make a mistake. When you're not making mistakes, you're not trying. Is it a mistake of the heart or a mistake of the mind? You know, if it's, you just screwed something up, okay, we learn from that and we move forward. Now, if you intentionally, you know, knew it was wrong and did it anyway, that's a whole different discussion.
Right.
But treat people the way you want your mom treated. Do the right thing for the right reason. That was like my 2 rules that I put in every letter for every new assignment I had. Do the right thing for the right reason and treat other people the way you want your mom treated. When you're on a traffic stop, does everyone need to get a ticket? No. And I always had people talk crap to me because as a motor, I probably wrote 80% warnings. Because what's our job? It's to change behavior. Okay, if I stop this guy that's driving to work at 6 a.m, that's barely making ends meet, and now I write him a $500 ticket, and his kid can't play Little League because he doesn't have the money to pay for the Little League because he's got to pay a $500 ticket, what message have I sent? If I sit down with that guy, or if I contact that guy at the window and say, hey, what's going on? Hey, I'm running late for work. I'm really sorry. Okay, hey, here's a written warning. That's my stat. I got my stat. And did it change his behavior? The next time he drives through, he's looking for me. And if the next time, if I stop him, you know, a few days later, okay, well, now maybe this time you get a ticket. But our job's to change behavior. And it's always been that communication thing, you know, just treat people the way you want to be treated, the way you want your mom treated. If you don't like your mom, the way you want your dad treated. Would you want someone, and you've seen cops and deputies, the way they talk to some people, and it's like, would you want an officer to talk to your parent that way? Or your wife that way, or your daughter that way? Then why are you talking to someone that way? That badge doesn't imbue you with unlimited power.
Too many people forget that the badge and the gun and the uniform is just tools of the job.
Absolutely.
They forget to be just a person.
Absolutely.
And the same way you're on this side of the window talking to the driver, you could be the driver.
Just like I was coming down here today.
Yep. Yeah. I remember when the 30-day impound went into effect. And I remember a sergeant sitting at briefing going, hey, let's use a little discretion. If it's 6 a.m. and you stop a guy and his truck's loaded with tools and he's on his way to work and you impound his truck for 30 days,
right?
What impact? Are you having a positive impact on him, or are you compounding the negative impact?
Correct. Well, and we're back to what's the magnitude of order beyond that? Because now that guy goes home, he's motherfucking law enforcement. Yeah. And to his family and his friends and everyone else. And what message have you sent to how many people may get stopped? And then what's their attitude going to be when they get stopped? So it's like the effect that we can have on people just from how we treat them. To me, it's never been complicated.
Well, even if you really look at it too, the last 10 years, especially with everybody recording everything, the impact that we have on other officers who now have to go hit the road for their shift after you just mistreated somebody.
Right.
Or you did something that's blasted all over social media, and now everybody's assuming that every cop acts that same way.
100%. 100%. I mean, it doesn't go the other way, but but no, 100%. And it's just never, you know, I've worked with a lot of guys that fought everyone. And it's those guys that, you know, when you're on a call and you hear them say they'll be en route to back, you're like, nah, 22, I got it. Because, you know, as soon as they get out of the car and open their mouth and say one word, the fight's on. And it's like, you know, the reason I'm here today and still somewhat ambulatory, you know, I got a couple shoulder replacement surgeries coming up, but how many people end their careers 5-10 years in because they fight? They got to fight everyone. It's like your mouth is your most powerful weapon. How many parolees and guys that were twice your size did you talk down just by, hey, come on, man. Is this where we really need to go? Just talk to people. It's not hard. You don't have to fight everyone. You don't have to prove, but there's so many guys that their badge is this big and they feel they got to prove something to someone. And it's like, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Maybe to yourself, maybe that's your problem
that's exactly
your ego.
That's exactly it.
That you've got to prove to yourself at the end of the day that you're the biggest, baddest, toughest MFer out there. Well, you're not. You're not. There's always someone bigger and badder. And you better learn that early in your career or you're going to have a short career. So if it's not getting your ass kicked, it's doing something that's going to land you in legal trouble.
Yeah, that's the bigger aspect is your mouth is going to get you into a couple things. One, it's going to put you in a situation where you're going to put another officer in jeopardy because they got to come rescue you.
Right.
Or two, it's going to put you in jeopardy where you no longer have your house and your boat and your truck and everything else.
Right.
Because you couldn't control your ego.
Right. Absolutely. And that those same people, that ego continues, even if they do make it through their career. How many divorces do they go through? How many ex-wives are getting a portion of their retirement because that ego didn't allow them to put down their, you're going to do what I say because, I'm the man and I'm this. And, how many marriages did it cost them? How much, in the long run? And then they retire and what do? Well, I got to find another cop job somewhere, and that's kind of that whole transitioning thing is, what are you going to do? You got to have a purpose. Is your purpose really? And I think that's one thing that I always tried teaching to the kids that I taught at the college and trainees and, deputies that worked for me is this job's not who you are. It's what you do. And
Stop stealing my lines.
I think so many people internalize this career and it becomes their identity. It's their whole thing. Who are you? I'm a cop. Well, no, you're not. A cop's what you do. It's the profession you have. It's your career. It's not who you are. Who are you? I'm a cop. No. And it's that, I always taught my students, the friends that you have now, keep those friends. Don't just hang out with cops. Don't just go to the choir practice and, you have your beers with your buddies and you shit talk admin and you shit talk this and this fucker and this and that. And it's.
Do you think anybody who's got 5 years on right now knows what you meant when you just said choir practice?
Oh man. Yeah, I'd probably not. Probably not. So choir practice for those of you that are young.
I only say
career.
It's funny. It's because I was just at jiu-jitsu the other morning and talking with my professor about choir practice, and what do you mean by choir? Oh,
so choir practice is not a bunch of us standing around singing in a barbershop quartet. Choir practice is when you get together after work and drink beers together and MF everyone and everything.
But they don't call it choir practice anymore. I don't even know if they get together after shift and go hang out anymore.
Yeah. But I mean, how many people have you known throughout your career that only hang out with other cops?
100%.
And it's like they go to the river with other cops. They go here with their barbecues are with other cops. And you've put yourself in this bubble that, hey, the rest of the world, when you get out of law enforcement, the rest of the world's moved on. And this, you making your whole identity and everything you are about being a cop. If you get out of that, what are you going to do?
But it's the catch-22, like you talked about earlier. You're a young cop. You got to pick a shift. You don't have a pick. You're the last guy to sign up.
Right.
Guess what you're working? You're working weekend nights.
Right.
Or you're working weekend days. Or you're working this goofy overlap shift. So you're not working with normal society.
Right.
So the only people you have available in your early years as a cop to hang out with are the other cops who have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off when you can head to the river.
Right.
I've often said the one thing that was a huge reset for me was making detective, because all of a sudden I went back to working Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Right.
And I had the ability to reconnect with all my friends who weren't going out on a Tuesday night. They were actually going out on a Friday and Saturday night. And
right.
So you get back into more normal life.
Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely an aspect of it, is working shift work and working Christmas and Thanksgiving and all these other things. Is, like I said, my family ultimately are the ones that paid the price for that early in my career. And like I said, that's kind of towards the end of my career, kind of what, was the impetus to, okay, maybe I'm done with this. We have custody of our granddaughter. We got her when we've had her full time since she was 6 months old. So that was kind of now I'm a new parent again with a baby. And so, there was that whole aspect. And then, working traffic, the captain, like I said, captain's one of my best friends, and he decided to retire and pull the plug. And, he kind of always stayed out of like promotional stuff and promotional evals. And the lieutenant that was there at the time and I didn't see eye to eye. He was one of the ones that preached about leadership, but didn't live by any of it. Complete micromanager, and dinged me on a couple evals because I would call him out on things and say, no, this doesn't make sense. We shouldn't be doing this. And, or just questioning, and didn't like to be questioned when, wouldn't make a decision. But then when he made one, it was, now this is the decision, and we're not, even if you show me something that completely disproves it, we're sticking with that decision. Okay. But, dinged me on a couple evals for, well, your admin writing's poor. Okay, well, I'm working on a PhD. Well, that's education writing. That's not admin writing. Well, I've watched you firewall guys that I wouldn't give a crown to. So it was kind of like that. I'd like to make lieutenant before I retire, but is that kind of the hill I'm going to die on? And it was kind of that we got to kind of this last thing where, Rancho Christmas lights are a big thing up in the north end of Rancho, and we run all the traffic control for that. So basically the whole month of December, everyone in traffic's working 15, 16-hour days every single day. So we get to the week between Christmas and New Year's where nothing's really going on. And I hit that lieutenant up and said, hey, I'd like to take this. Or I said, if it's cool, I want to take off the week between Thanksgiving and Christmas, or Christmas and New Year's. Corporal's here. There'll be supervision. And no answer. So I was upstairs in Donnie's office after that, and he's just sitting there just glaring at me. And I'm like, so he gets up and walks in his office. I follow him.
I want to watch.
Yeah. I follow him in. I'm like, hey, is there a problem? Well, yeah, there is. Okay. Well, please do tell. You take a lot of time off. And I said, okay, well, the county gives me 5 weeks of vacation a year. That's my time to use. And if my family has something going on, my family literally paid the price my entire career, me wanting to promote, working narcotics, working 90 hours, a pay period of overtime, on top of the regular 40, SWAT, mate, call outs. They've paid the price. And at this point in my career, if my wife wants to go do something with our kids, especially now that we have a young one, I'm going to take the time and do it. If I have the time on the books and I have coverage since I have a corporal, I'm going to take the time.
It's not a snow day.
And that time's right. That's not a snow day. That's time given to me by the county. We get 5 weeks a year. And I was never that guy that took 5 weeks off at a time. It was, I've got this time and I'm going to spread it out through the year so we can do things. It was never, hey, I'm going to take a month off and then come back. It's, I have this amount of time and this is how I'm going to take it off. And being the traffic sergeant, it was flexible enough to where I could take the time. So I was like, okay, so what else? Well, and then I told him, I said, no one lays on their deathbed and says, I wish I worked more. And ultimately, I'm not going to be that guy.
I'm guessing he was a always at work kind of guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it was whatever. And then I said, and what's the other thing? Well, you told me you were taking it off. You didn't ask. And I said, well, if you go back and look at the email, I said, if it's cool with you, I would like to take this time off. That's not how it came across. You were telling me you were going to do it. And chain of command. And I was like, okay, well, do you want me here? Yeah, you need to be here. Copy. I'll be here. So that was, that kind of really started to sour and it's like, as long as that guy's here, I'm not going to promote to lieutenant. I'd have to go to another station, make my bones there, which it wouldn't be a big deal because, by this point in my career, I know most of the guys that I've come up with that were my peers are now lieutenants and captains and through some of my accomplishments in my career, I know, most of the guys in the brass. One of my sergeants, when I was in the jail, became good friends. He was now a deputy chief. And it's like, so if I went to another station, I wouldn't, but it would take a year to get on the list and then get promoted. And then it's okay to maximize retirement. I've got to do a year as a lieutenant. So now it's like, okay, I'm 53 at that time. Do I want to do another 3 years, 4 years? To see the benefit of that. And then you've got these guys chasing, well, we just got another contract with another 15%. You want to chase to the end of that contract? And it's like, at what point do you the coal is 2% a year.
Yeah.
It's 3% for our retirement. So it's like, am I going to chase it for 1%? And it's like, at what point? So then one night at work, I had some heart issues. My blood pressure was 200 over something, and my heart rate was like 180. And they took me to the hospital, and it was kind of at that point I was like, okay, to what end is this worth it? So my wife and I talked, and I started talking about, I'm just going to retire. And she's like, no, do it right. She was like, because I was at the point where, like, even before that, there were some times when things would happen and I'd be like,
start writing the resignation.
Screw this. I'm going to, well, not resignation, but I'm going to service retire.
Right.
And she's like, no, you're jacked up. You do it right. So the heart stuff, I started working on all that stuff, and both of my shoulders were bad. I, could barely lift my arms above my head from all the years of SWAT and SED and motors and just everything. I was like, okay, well, I'll go get checked out. Well, I need 2 shoulder replacements. They've already done one. They did a partial and it didn't work. Like, that's my range of motion.
Oh, wow.
So they're about to do a full replacement there. The other one needs it. My back's, jacked up. And it was like, okay, so I put in my medical stuff, and I went, and when I had this, and this was really the catalyst where I was like, okay, I'm done. So I had this surgery done for the partial replacement. And at this point, Donnie's already retired. Well, he'd call me to check up on me, but none of my chain of command. And then I went in for my promotional eval because it was that time of year. So, I was off after shoulder surgery, but I went in for my promotional eval, and that lieutenant that we were talking about sees me and says, oh, hey, sorry, I haven't called to check on you and see how you're doing. And I told him, I said, you know what? That's just not the type of leader you are. And he kind of chuckled and laughed. And I said, no, I'm not kidding. And it was like,
that wasn't meant as a joke.
And it was that day that I went home and I told my wife, I said, I'm done. I had already gotten an attorney for the work comp stuff because they were San Bernardino County. And my work comp attorney told me, he said, San Bernardino County is the worst county in the world to deal with for work comp stuff. And even like after this surgery didn't work, they denied the revision surgery to fix it. And I had to appeal it. And that it's been a year, or it's been a year and a half since I had this surgery. So I'm still pending that. And it's so going through. So I had gotten an attorney, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to talk to him, and they have a retirement attorney there too. And I said, I'm going to retire and do the medical retirement and start the process. Cause that just shows me the way this ship is continuing to sail. And it's like, there are some phenomenal people in the brass of the sheriff's department. And there's some that are exactly what we were talking about. That ego is, that ego, and that I want to be, and to get to my next step, I don't care whose head and shoulders I have to step on and push down to get there. I'm going to do it. And I just couldn't stomach that anymore. The politics of it got to a point, and I've known my whole career that politics play in, but at 54, 55 years old, it was like, I don't need this anymore. And, I've set myself up to where, I'd been doing the woodworking for so long, and, got a lot of clients, and I have a buddy that owns a lighting company that I do all their antique lighting for them. And so it was like, I had stuff set up in the pipeline already that, I can retire, get my medical retirement, and just roll into doing the woodworking and stuff I want to do.
Were you teaching while you were still working?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was running the post program for the college, and that same thing kind of got to when my predecessor not my predecessor, but my boss at the college he had worked for Clovis PD for 25 years, retired, was bored with retirement, and ended up going to Afghanistan as a teaching law enforcement and stuff. And then came back, and an opportunity came. He lives in Utah, but an opportunity came up to be the criminal justice director. And I worked for him, and he was of the exact same mindset we are. You take care of your people, do the right thing for the right reason. And he helped build that program up to where it was doing great and bringing in a ton of students. Then COVID hit and things kind of slowed down, but him bumping heads with admin was just because they don't believe in the principles that we believe in. And and he finally hit his 6-year point, and he said, I'm done, I'm retiring. And at that point I was kind of like seeing because they were trying to get me to take his place. And I was like, well, watching the walls he was bumping his head against. And, when he would meet with the vice president of the college and say, hey, the college has this, like, no student left, not that's the policy, but it's like students first and this and that. And it's like, why are we doing, I don't care. And it was like, well, you're supposed to, you're the vice president of instruction. You should care about these policies that your president has put in place. And the president of the college preaches servant leadership and this and that. And it was like, no, we're going to do this. And I was like, yeah, I want no part of that. So I was stepping back. I was going to retire at the same point, and they didn't have a coordinator for the post program. And it was like, well, if I step back, then they're going to lose their academies and all of that. So the bass player and harmonica player in my band, both were teaching there as teachers. So I talked to them, and they agreed to step in and be like co-coordinators, because I was there. And again, back to, I'd work at Rancho from 6 a.m. to 4, and then drive to the college Monday through Thursday night and be there from 6 to 10, so it was like, it was a ton of hours. So again, it was like, yeah, I'm ready to step back from all of this stuff and, be able to go do things with my family and be able to just, my shop's on the back of my property. So if I'm going to work in the wood shop, you'll walk back.
That long walk.
And, yeah. There's benefits, and you think, oh, it's right there. Well, yeah, it's always right there. If you got something to do, it's right there. And,
right.
But at the same time, when you're working, you need to get something done.
It's right there.
Yeah. The granddaughter's coming out and, Papa, can you do this? And you're like, okay, yeah, whatever. So, but yeah, so the college got to the point where it was just, I was like, so they stepped in and took that. Well, the 832 program was Monday through Friday it's like the week when they work. So I was like, okay, I'll stay on and handle the 832. And I did that for a year. And then this last year I applied for that full-time spot because it came open again. They finally opened it, and I applied for it and was like, okay, well, it's full medical, which retiring county doesn't have lifetime medical. So having to come out of pocket for me, my wife, and the baby, well, she's 6 now, she's not a baby, but having to come out of pocket for that at, $2,000 a month is like, okay, that's a nice chunk of your retirement check and,
right.
And even the extra income. So, 100% medical at the college, you don't pay anything out of pocket. And then it was like $120,000 a year. So I was like, I could teach 4 classes and take that on. Well, that vice president and the dean, well, she was dean, but then she became a vice president too, who were both PhDs. They were on my last interview. And then a lieutenant that's a friend of mine applied too. And we both got interviews and got to the final interview. Well, then they didn't hire either of us. And they, against their own practices, reopened it to all the people they told you don't meet the minimum qualifications. They reopened it to interview them. And I was, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm the writing's on the wall here. So I told them, this isn't like sour grapes, but with the way that you're running the program and treating your people, I can't be a part of this anymore. Because I had the most institutional knowledge. I had been the post coordinator for, 4 or 5 years. I have all the contacts with post and, all of the institutional knowledge of the way the criminal justice program runs. I could step right into it and be doing all of this stuff without any issue. Because when Rand came in, the prior boss, he stepped in the position, the other guy walked away and just left him. So he had to learn the entire position himself. So I had been there and shadowed him and seen all of the stuff. I knew where the snakes were and, but it was like, because of the personal animosities, again, back to me telling them, no, post isn't going to allow you to do that. You can't do that. This is what you need to do. And post will require you to do it, or they'll yank. Because the reason I took over the program is because post suspended it, because the prior coordinator wasn't doing the things he was supposed to do. So post came in and said, yeah, this. So I was running the correctional academy, because same thing, correctional academy came in, and STC, the state Bureau of State Community Corrections, came in, BSCC, and shut down their academy because Rand was teaching everything, because no one ever told him that you had to have subject matter experts teaching different stuff. So he was teaching the correctional academy. They came down for their annual review and they're like, whoa, no. So they shut down the program. Well, I was the sergeant at the time at ASU, our administrative support unit. Well, we ran the jail academy for the sheriff's department. So when the deputies graduate the regular academy, they then go do a 2-week jail academy that teaches them all the BSCC stuff and gets them their 54 hours, or a little more than that. But we're like, so I was already running that program, and I already had all the instructors because all of my deputies taught all of those classes. So I set that up for the college and got them to hire all of my staff at the sheriff's department as adjunct instructors. So we got that program recertified. And then post came in and same thing. They were like, yeah, you're doing all these things that you're not supposed to be doing and not doing things you should be doing. So Rand called me and said, hey, Do you know anyone that could come in as a coordinator and take over? Because Post has said if this guy stays coordinator, they're yanking the program. So I was like, I can do it. And then Desiree that worked for me, she took over the correction side. So I took over the Post stuff and got all that stuff certified. So I had all that institutional knowledge that, I could have stepped into this position with. And you've got, now my two buddies running the program, but the college tells them you don't have any authority. Yeah, you're the Post coordinators, but you have no authority as far as the college goes. So they've got instructors not giving them, like, the Post says you have to have lesson plans. Well, you don't have any authority as the coordinator to tell this instructor, I need your lesson plan or you're not going to teach next semester. So they're just like kind of empty suits and the college isn't holding the instructors liable or responsible. So It's like Post is going to come in and say, where's these lesson plans? Well, and I just got to the point where like, I can't do this anymore with the college. It's like when I tried to come in so that I could become, because that full-time instructor was also the department chair for criminal justice. So there would have been some authority to be able to hold some people responsible and say, hey, these things need to be done. This is what these people need things. There's a budget, but they don't have a way to get to the budget. So trying to step into that position, and because I really didn't want to work full-time again, I was like, but there's some benefits to it. And I can also have a positive impact in some more students' lives, right. and my buddies that are running the program, I can help them. But when I saw, when that happened with the hiring thing, I was like, yeah, no, I can't be a part of this. I'm not going to. I've seen, and it's funny, Rand that I worked for, his wife, her favorite saying was, when people reveal who they are, believe them. People are going to reveal themselves. Believe who they tell you they are, because that's who they are. Even if they come back to you and say, oh, that was a mistake. Once they've shown you who they are, believe them. So it was the college had revealed themselves multiple times over the years. And I always kind of just, I'm doing this for a bigger cause, for a better cause. Sorry. And, but I finally got to the point where I was like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. I got a little one at home and, and family and, so I said, I'm done and resigned. And I went and met with human resources and laid everything out to them. And it was just, okay, thanks. Well, thanks, Well, and because when they told me I didn't get the job, they just called and left a voicemail on my answering machine. Sorry, you weren't successful and it was the one dean that called. She said, sorry. And I was like, you guys probably need to, the HR lady, I said, you probably need to revamp how you, tell people they're not getting a job, maybe like a personal contact. And if they don't answer, you call back until you get a hold of them. I said, it's pretty unprofessional. And they were just like, okay, well, thanks for your input. And so I was like, and she asked, is it sour grapes? Is that why you're resigning? I said, no. If it would be sour grapes, it would be over the way that I was treated throughout the entire, time that I worked, the decade that I worked there. There were multiple times I didn't get paychecks because someone screwed up this or something. Like my buddy, Jamie, my best friend, Jamie, that took over the program as the coordinator. He hasn't gotten a check on time the entire 4 years that he's been there. And it's like, you're a college. You have a payroll department. How hard is it to not, never in my law enforcement career, 28 and a half years, did I never not get a paycheck.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's just the laissez-faire that we'll get you a rotating check, or, you'll get your check next time. You have a regular full-time job. And that's what they said one time about me was,
right,
he's got a full-time job. He doesn't need the money. No, that's not the principle. The principle is these people are coming on their own time after work and putting in these hours for you. You need to make sure they're paid. It's back to the take care of your people. If they don't feel valued, for any other reason other than they're getting a paycheck, at least make sure they get their paycheck on time, because you're not showing them that they matter. So it was just that, okay, I've had enough. So, do stuff like this, doing some filming stuff with Chris and, I think ultimately, I think that I would like this type of thing to kind of be what I do to give back. I've got a charity that I'm a part of. Like I said, so real quick,
before we go into what you're working on now, something that's kind of been rattled around in my head, thinking about the mate teams, not just yours, all the mate teams that are out there, and the increased talk of mental health and what this job does to us. Is there a change now? Because I'm thinking about it, all the mate members, they're going out largely on fatalities most of the time.
Correct. And
They're constantly dealing with dead bodies.
That's actually something I was going to touch on when I was talking.
Okay.
I've, and for years I've shoved that stuff down, and, and to the point where, it's caused issues with, and I've always been good at compartmentalizing things. I think most of us are, but eventually it's going to come out. And, my wife and I have had our, we've been married 22 years now and been together 25, but, and that's the, her complaint to me has always been, you communicate well with everyone else, but when you and I communicate, you're defensive, you're this, and, it's like, honestly, where does that come from? Where, and now being retired and kind of being away from it, and, and stepping away from it and looking at, like, I was standing in the shower a few weeks ago after, her and I had a little bit of a soiree, and I was thinking, and I was like, where does this come back to? And, and for as long as my career, that's kind of when I talk about this stuff, there's kind of like 3 incidents in my career that really kind of stick with me, and I can never let go. And one's Jeremiah McKay. I was about 4 minutes away from where he was when he was shot, 4 or 5 minutes away. So there's if I had gotten there a little quicker, I could, realistically, you couldn't have changed anything. December 2nd, being a first responder on that and seeing, the carnage and devastation that a few people did in a few minutes. And just that whole, at the end, we were on a perimeter spot, and we had been there 12 hours, 13 hours. And the FBI guys came through with their dogs and said, hey, you guys need to move. There's a whole bag of IEDs right on the other side of this glass. Like, cause we were standing outside the glass of the IRC, and right on the other side by some planters, trees, there was a duffel bag just full of the IEDs that they had made. And then you find out later that they had driven by a couple times trying to set them off with their detonators. And you're like, shit, man, I was standing there for how many hours? How quickly could life have changed? And then the third was right after I had started at Victorville. And, at that point I had been a cop 15 years, but I responded to a dead baby call. Well, baby not breathing call, and got there, and, the mom comes up and hands me, 3-month-old infant, and just bruises everywhere. Lividity, and, come to find out, basically boyfriend had gotten tired of listening to the baby cry, and he had stuffed it under a couch cushion and slept on top of it. And for whatever reason, and I'd been a mate guy for years. I mean, in my career, I've personally handled about 150 fatals. And then as a supervisor, I've seen hundreds, and, kids, and it's all horrible. But for whatever reason, that one sticks with me. And it's just, I can still see the bruising on the baby. When the fireman took the diaper off, in between the legs, there was a bruise where it looked like the baby had just been punted. And it was just that image, but then by that point, my kids are teenagers, it's not, but it was just, for whatever reason, that stuck with me. And it's like, and like I told my wife the next day when we were talking, and I was kind of being contrite because I really felt bad about this, is I kind of can take back to that point in my career where I think part of me just stopped caring. And it was like, even after all the stuff I'd seen, it was like right there, the depravity of man really kind of like set in for me. And it's like, man, I grew up in a church and grew up Christian, and like knowing about good and evil, and that there are evil people out there. And even as a cop for 15 years, I know there's evil out there, but this one really just crystallized it into, this sweet, innocent thing. And, I've seen them in car accidents, but it was a car accident. It's the pure evil of this was just, and I think a part of me just turned off that day, and just a part of me just stopped caring. And I think it's just, it kind of carried through the career, and, you put on the face, but deep down there's that part that's just never been quite right again. And it's that, and that's another thing I try and tell people is, don't be afraid to talk to people. That night that happened, I went home, and, luckily my wife, I think at that point my wife was still dispatching. And so, and that, just on that note too, for those of you that are still working, contact your dispatchers, because they're not always okay either. And I think dispatchers get left a lot out of the first responder thing, especially when there's critical incidents. Most times they don't find out what happened. They're left guessing what happened, and the cops get, there's after action things. They'll bring a counselor in for a debriefing. But I know a lot of dispatchers from my wife and even my wife, when we talked about, they didn't get invited to those debriefings. And it's like they were there on the other end of the phone with this person taking their last breath or whatever the case may be, and they get forgotten. And I really think that we need to do a better job of, as a sergeant, I tried to always call the dispatcher and say, hey, this is what happened. So at least they have some closure.
Right. And
they may need to do whatever. And if there's a debriefing, hey, we're going to have a debriefing, come to this. But I think they get forgotten and left out of the conversation. And they have that, they go home at the end of the shift and like, well, I wonder what happened. But on that incident, being able to go home and talk to my wife and like, man, and that night I actually drank. I generally am not a drinker, but that night it was just so brutal and just the, and the nonchalant nature of the guy about it and everything. And even his girlfriend, the baby's mom, the nonchalant nature about the whole thing, it just took a part out of me that I don't think's ever come back. And that's like now being having a little one again and, having her since she was 6 months. It's, our kids jokingly and they're like, man, if we did what she did when we were that age, you would have lost your shit. And it's like, well, you're right. I would have. One, I was a young cop with a badge this big that thought I knew everything. And being 50, 54, 55, 56 with a lot of life experience under your belt, you learn what's important and what's not. So yeah, I am a lot more patient with her, but it's still that precious life that, and I think she's started to bring me kind of out of that. And I started going to therapy again and talking. I've a therapist that we've become good friends over the years. My wife and I saw him years ago. And then, I've talked to him in and out he's a musician too. So we bonded over music stuff, and he was a former probation officer and his son was a Fontana police officer. So he gets the law enforcement side of things. So, trying to get across, and it's one of those things with our line of work that people think that, I got to be big and tough and strong and the type A personality, and you're weak if you talk to someone. And it's like, I'm here to tell you, you're not. You got to get that shit out. And, it's the same reason that the woodworking, the band, you got to have healthy outlets. That ending up in the bottom of a bottle generally only ends one place. And, that Chris Emmons, John, ended up taking his life, and it was alcohol, and it was, stuff going on with the department, and, that, kind of being pushed into retirement. And, John made some decisions in his career that affected his career, but at the end of the day, his heart was always in the right place for his people and for the people that he served. And, the last couple of weeks before he took his life, I talked to him a bunch. He called me several times on Graveyard, and I'd be like, hey, let's hook up and get dinner. He's like, nah, I'm good. And, and he had some stuff going on in his life that, that it's just tragic, and I've lost a few friends that have taken their lives because they just didn't think they could, and it's, hindsight, you're like, what could I have said differently? What could I have done differently? But, you can't be afraid to take care of yourself. And I think that's something that as cops and first responders, we don't do well. We want to take care of everyone else. Our job is to take care of everyone else, and my wife has said this before, and I think it not only applies to her, but like she said, when I'm filling everyone else's cup and pouring it out of mine, who's filling my cup? And I think that goes to us in law enforcement too, is we're always pouring our heart and soul and love into making sure that the community is taken care of, and all of the things we're seeing. People don't call us to say, hey, I'm having a great day, come over and barbecue with me. You're seeing, and not to discount like the military side, and even Andy Stumpf on his Cleared Hot podcast has said this about military. You see some shitty stuff, but you're not like cops where you're seeing it 12 hours a day, every day. No one's calling us because they want to tell us about the great day we had. We're seeing shit all day long, every day. And you're going, and then people are like, well, why was that cop so gruff? Why was he in such a bad mood? Well, you don't know the call he was just coming from. He could have just held a dead baby in his arms and had the experience I had. And then you've got to put that away because the next call you go to is something totally unrelated to that. And you've got to You can't be dealing with that. And that was one of the things that I was teaching a criminal justice class one time, and we watched a video of a cop being a little gruff and one of the students was like, well, no, you should be like robots. You should be able to be professional in this way. And it's like, do you not understand that cops are human beings too? At the end of the day, we go home to our families. We have the same problems you have. Financial problems, our kids not listening, our kids doing drugs, our kid got in trouble at school, our wife's cheating on us. There could be all kinds of we're still human beings. We still have to process all that. Just because we put on this badge and gun and nifty uniform doesn't make you this robot that has no emotions. You gotta realize that, what's that guy coming from? And I think in the call that we watched, the guy had been on like a baby drowning call right before he responded to that call. And it was a bunch of 415 teenagers at a party, and they end up throwing one of the girls to the ground, and they didn't need to use that kind of force. Well, what was he coming from? Where's his mindset? Are people listening? So I think on both sides, I talk about, deputies communicating better, but it's both sides. The public needs to see that, hey, cops are people too. And we don't always do the best job of getting that message across that, hey, we're human beings. We have all the foibles that everyone else has that we need to deal with. And that, that we need to, hey, yeah, I could have compartmentalized that better before I went to the next thing. But at the end of the day, I'm human, and something could have triggered my emotion. And yeah, we need to work on controlling those things. But at the end of the day, we're human. And you need to take care of yourself. You need to realize, yeah, I'm a human. I'm not a robot. I can't handle all of this shit. All of this crap that I see day in, day out, that I'm just stuffing down. At some point, the bag gets full, and it's going to come back out. And in some people, it's sexual misconduct, and some people it's gambling, and some people it's alcohol. It's going to come back out somehow. And it ends a lot of people's careers through these various things. So, that's the cautionary tale of it is, hey, you can't just let all of this stuff pile up. So it's not weak to talk to other people, even if it's a buddy that you trust, that you work with, that, hey, look, dude, I got some shit going on, and.
Well, the thing is too, that a lot of people don't understand or think about when you're yes, veterans see some horrible stuff when they're deployed, but when they come home, for the most part, there isn't the reminders
right
when they're here. Whereas you or I go to that baby not breathing call, or that baby that's been abused, you're going to drive by that house. You're going to drive down that street. You're going to drive through that intersection for the rest of your career.
Right.
And
especially if you work in a small agency, like when I worked in Rialto's 30 square miles. You're driving in this box for the next, if that's your 30-year career, for 30 years, you're driving around this 30-mile square box. So yeah, you're going to see all those places. Yeah, I took a fatal there. Yeah, I took a fatal there. Yeah, that guy was shot and murdered there. That woman was raped there. And it takes a toll. And I think for a long time throughout my career, I downplayed that and didn't take that seriously, that, hey, it's just a part of the job. You deal with it.
I don't think we were talking about it as much early in our careers.
Never.
And so now you start seeing, oh, wow, some of the things that could have been done differently throughout our careers. Even, you go back to when we started, you were 26, I was 23. For the most part, we really aren't mature.
No.
And you
think we are.
You think, for me, pretty much all I had done out of high school, law enforcement. I was a cadet by, 7 months out of high school, and that's all I ever did. And you're putting me into a scenario now at 22, 23, 21 years old to see a portion of society that, though everybody knows there's boogeymen out there and everybody knows there's evil, very few people get to touch it.
Correct.
And you're putting a young man and young woman in a scenario where they have to address that. That's, in the grand scheme of things, that shouldn't sit right in your head and your heart.
Right.
It should actually mess you up.
Right.
And we don't at least when I started, we don't encourage them to voice that, man, that didn't make me feel well.
Right.
At least now.
That's one of the favorite things that Andy says that I keyed on is when you touch war touches you back.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly right in our career too. When you look into the darkness is looking back into you, and you get a piece of that back. And I think you're 100% right. That shouldn't sit well with us. But how long do we go and we just say, that's just part of the job?
Well, and what is our job? Hey, can you clear that call? Because you got a residential burg pending.
Right.
You've got a 415 party, whatever it is. Right. You've got another call pending.
Yeah. Well, that's work in Victorville. We'd have 5 guys working and 7-8 pages of calls holding. Victorville handles 600 to 800 calls for service in a 24-hour period. It's, hey, send the next. When I was working Rancho as patrol sergeant, one graveyard night, we had no calls pending. And one of my buddies was like, man, it was kind of busy earlier. And I'm like, busy? And I call status Victorville. And he looked at it and he's like, oh my God. They had like 4 pages of calls. He goes, how do they handle those?
They don't.
And I go, one at a time. Send the next.
You start your shift and that screen's never going to clear.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you start at 6 p.m., maybe at 4 a.m, you clear it. And it's like, and these people are calling because I called in my burglary report yesterday and no one's been out here. Well, yeah, sorry. But that's absolutely, but think about it. When you were in the academy, did they ever talk about mental health or resiliency?
No,
never. No, I don't remember ever hearing anything about it.
I can't honestly say that I really started hearing about mental health until I started doing computer forensics and you started looking at child porn and that stuff. And the FBI was really good. And this is even into the early 2000s where they started going, wait a minute, we need to get our examiners and the people handling these cases to psychologists on a regular basis. But that was damn near 20 years into my career.
Right. Yeah. And that's, and how many people have taken their lives needlessly because, and again, it's, even the jail in Orange County. I had a guy that I had worked with for, 5 or 6 months and had kind of mentored me. And, we're at work one day and get a call that they found him. He was sitting in his car up on an overlook and put his gun in his mouth and blew his head off. And it was like, and I'm, brand new deputy. I'm, a year in maybe. And I'm like, what's that about? But it was just like, oh, well, he must have had some stuff going on and just, no talk about mental health or anything else. It was like, well, he must have had some stuff going on and killed himself. He couldn't hack it. And that was the thing back then. Well, couldn't deal with it. Yep. He couldn't hack it. And it's like, I think as we've learned more about how the human mind works and the psyche and everything else, it's like, maybe we need to give some people some tools to deal with some things and what they're going through. Because it's, it's brutal.
Let's talk about something more positive. You're about to become a YouTube star.
Well, maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
What's the plan for that? So your daughter is going to be filming you doing your woodworking. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah. So with the woodworking I'm doing, I think like we were talking before, my daughter was a teacher. She went to the Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts in Hollywood and got a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in musical theater and moved to New York to pursue her dream of being on Broadway. And of course, New York, with rent being $4,000 for a shoebox, she had to work 2 jobs just to make ends meet. So it was like, well, when I can't go audition for anything because I can't make rent. So she was there a year, lived there for a year and moved home and decided she wanted to teach. Well, then she found out that her degree is not accredited. The college told them it was accredited, but it's nationally, not regionally, so you can't use it for anything, which it's now been fixed. So I told her, you need to call them and say, hey, how can I grandfather my, but in the meantime, she couldn't teach. So she was like, well, what am I going to do? Well, she ended up getting a CTE, career technical education credential, and started teaching drama at a school out by us. Well, the school decided they're going to do away with the drama program. So they said, hey, we're not renewing your contract because we're doing away with the program. So she was kind of like, what am I going to do? She was already going back to school to get another bachelor's so she could, but she's like, seeing behind the curtain and the wizard in education and where the education system is, she's like, I don't know that I want to do this. And she's very much an artistic, she's a phenomenal singer. very artistic. So she was like, I think I kind of want to start working with you, Dad, and do woodworking and learn furniture building and woodworking and do some of the social media type stuff. She's of that generation that, all of the social media. And so I have a buddy that has a YouTube channel that's like 2.5 million subscribers and does a lot of content. And he's always told me, you need to start a YouTube channel. You need to, and I was like, I started to do it one day and I was like, I can't build furniture and film and edit. That'd be another full-time job. And so when I was talking to Stephanie, I was like, hey, what do you think of, and she's like, oh, I'd love to do that. So we started filming some videos and she's doing the editing, and then she's starting an Etsy page. And I just bought a full-size 4x8 CNC. So my smaller CNC, she's starting to do signs and plaques and stuff on that. And I've done a lot of like retirement law enforcement plaques and stuff through the years. So she's going to kind of take that part of the business and have her Etsy page and kind of make money creating woodworking, but then also doing the content creation. So excited about that. That should be fun. So we'll see. She's excited to be an entrepreneur. And so we own the house next door to us, and she just got married. So her and her husband are going to rent that house from us so she can walk next door to work. So it should be good.
You're going to be the next YouTube star, man. We're going to see you all over the place.
I don't know about that. So, but no, that's kind of, and it's back to, I think one of the most important things when we talk about transitioning out of law enforcement is finding your purpose, finding your new purpose. Cause, for so long, law enforcement was our purpose, helping people. So what are you going to do when you don't have that anymore? How many people double dip and that's kind of the reason I didn't go into recon and accident reconstruction. It's like, I really don't want anything to do with any of that. I don't miss any of the job. There's a few people I miss, but most of them are friends that I still talk to. So it's like, I kind of miss the stroking and joking and briefings and, ragging on each other and, all of that, that camaraderie that comes with that side of it. But the job itself, the politics, the environment that we now have in America towards law enforcement, I don't miss any of that. The running calls, the shift work, I don't miss any of that, and I think so many people get out of it and they're sitting at home and they have no purpose. What am I going to do with my life? So, kind of before retirement, kind of for that, I've always had the woodworking and the music, but, I also there's one of my buddies hit me up, about 2019. They founded a charity called the Cannonball Memorial Run. And the whole purpose of it was to raise immediate financial relief for the families of fallen officers. Cause really up until recently, there's been no immediate financial relief. It was, you put into the government or whatever it is to get financial help, and eventually it'll come, but it could take months before there's anything. So our goal was to do, so their first year they drove across the U.S. Cannonball style and stopped at a couple agencies on the way to DC, ended in DC. And then since then they asked me to join, and I started making plaques to present to the agencies that we stopped at. And it's, our primary goal is officers that were murdered in the line of duty, and to try and, bring awareness to the number of officers that are ambushed or murdered in the line of duty. So the last few times we've gone, we stop at agencies on the way, and then we end it and collect patches of all the officers who are murdered in the line of duty, even through mail. So when there's an officer murdered in the line of duty, we send a check to the department or the family within 24 to 48 hours of the OMDP notifying it, and request a patch from the agency. And then at the end of our drive, we meet with the Attorney General of the U.S. and present them with all the patches of the officers that were murdered in the line of duty to try and emphasize and bring home that, hey, this is going on. And, as the top law enforcement officer in the nation, you should be doing something about this. So that's kind of where the impetus for that group came from. And then I became a board member of the charity. So that's, having that kind of mission and goal it's law enforcement related, but not, like I'm still trying to be a cop, but it's a purpose to go towards something that I'm passionate about, and that has been a huge part of my life for so long that, I can still have a purpose and try and affect positive change without having to be in the career doing the job. So, that's one of my passions and purposes is, to try and continue to build that. And, this year we're kind of restructuring a little bit and adding a DBA, Legacy Valor project. And we bought a Milo system and a simulator, and we're going to be going out to agencies offering free scenario training and simulator training. One of the things that really hit home when we did these drives is, California law enforcement's really its own entity. The training we get, the funding we have, if an officer's killed in the line of duty, funding and financing and things for funerals and all that stuff really aren't an issue. You get into places like we were in some places in South Carolina that, the officers, if their last paycheck's their last paycheck, like if they're killed in the line of duty, their $13.50 an hour that they make, their wife gets that last paycheck and that's it. There's like no funding from the cities. Our last trip, we took like 10,000 rounds of ammo with us and some vests that were technically, expired because they were the 5 years, and presented them to somebody. And we met with a sheriff in this small town in South Carolina. Their water still comes from the water tower in the middle of town. And we meet with the sheriff, and he's wearing a flannel and jeans, has his 6-shooter on his hip and his badge pinned to his flannel shirt. He's driving his own truck. And we gave him like 5,000 rounds of ammunition, and he started crying. And we're like, "Are you okay, sir?" And he's like, "Yeah, you don't understand. My guys have to buy their own duty rounds. They have to buy their own guns. They have to buy whatever uniform they wear. They drive their own cars. They make like $13 an hour." And it's like, it was crazy that, and even like their county jail, the state prison supplies the food for the county jail, the state prison that's like a city over. And it was like, when you look at that, like people think, oh, these cops and their pensions and this and that. And it's like, well, that's not the majority of the way the country works. You got guys on the East Coast and in the South that are working 2 and 3 jobs to make ends meet to support their family. And if they're murdered in the line of duty, that's it, and they're left in some tough times. So that really kind of has become a passion and a mission that we're trying to do something about and provide that training. Because same thing, training in California. I mean, you can get awesome training on pretty much everything, but back there talking to some of those guys, like their academy training that was 2 weeks, at the state academy or whatever. I had a buddy that moved up to North Dakota, and he was a deputy here, and he went through North Dakota's academy. It's a state academy run out of Bismarck, and it was like 2 weeks live in. And he was like, it was like some classroom stuff. He goes, we shot one day, and he was like, zero stress. He's like, it was just like, wow, coming from being here 20 years and then going to that academy, it was like, wow, it was just night and day, the difference that really the rest of the country runs on. So if we can start getting some good training out, and, these guys that have never really seen what a proper T-stop. I mean, you've watched Cops, you see some of the stuff they do in places and you're like, oh, wow, how'd that guy not get killed? So, just kind of having that mission and that purpose, it's having a sense of purpose, and then having a little one again and raising her up. And, she spends a lot of time in the shop with me, and it's like just finding a purpose, having something that you give back to, whether it's a charity, whether it's taking classes at the college, finding a purpose for yourself so that you don't have that feeling of, well, I dedicated my life to all this and for what? And now I'm out of it. And because in all reality, the minute you walk out the door of your agency, you're forgotten. It comes back to your position number. And they've got these deputies in the academy that are graduating. And as soon as you retire, they promote someone into your spot. And there's down the line, people backfill all those spots.
You stepped off the train kept going.
Yeah. Once you're gone, you're gone. And what are you going to do? And it's even like you see some of the colleges have these guys teaching that retired 25 years ago. Well, what do you know about law enforcement now that you're teaching? And that's why at the college, I always tried to hire guys that were currently working, because you're going to be getting current stuff. And it's like, but you get these guys retiring, I've been forgotten. They'll go to the retirement luncheons and see their partners that they worked with for years, but that's all they have. What else do you have in your life? And I think in some ways it's getting better, because I see a lot of friends that have retired that are traveling, and their wives, and they're doing great stuff and enjoying their lives. Because that's one thing my dad always told me was, you need to stay busy.
Mm-hmm.
That's partly probably one of the reasons he worked till 79, but he's always gardened. He's woodworked. He's always had a hobby. He's always done stuff. The day he retired, he took up guitar and started learning guitar. And it's like, you know, he's always told me, if you sit in front of the TV, you're going to die there, because you have to have a purpose. As human beings, we have to have a purpose. We have to have something that means something to us. And if you don't, you're going to wither away and die. And that's probably where that stat of within 5 years of retirement, people die and cops drop dead. And I think especially when you talk about first responders, fire, paramedics, dispatchers, cops, nurses, you don't have that sense of purpose anymore. And unless you have consciously made the decision that I'm going to find another purpose, what are you going to do? And that doesn't start the day you retire. That needs to start while you're still working. But it goes back to what we were talking about right in the beginning. It comes back to that, not letting this job become your identity, no matter what you do, whether it's a hose dragger or whatever. I mean, maybe those guys want to work forever because they only work 2 days a week anyway.
Yeah, I give them credit. I'm 150 something episodes, and I think I've only had 3 firefighters, because the ones that I talk to, when they retire, they just go enjoy life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it just, yeah, they're a different breed.
Yeah. But it's that, you know, realizing that this isn't who I am. This is a job I do. And when the job's done, the job's done. And I don't need to.
They are a good mustache, though.
They are. They are a good mustache.
I think that's a requirement for getting hired. Like, show us the mustache you could grow.
Yeah. Yeah. What does Andy call it? A dick broom? But no, it's exactly that. It's, what are we going to do with our lives? What's your purpose? And if you don't have a purpose, you're an empty shell. And it's, do you want to lay on your deathbed and look back and say, I could have been so much more. I could have done so much more. Or do you want to just always hang on those laurels of, you know, it's the Al Bundy, you know, I was the football high school star, and live on those accolades of, you could never let go that, you know, I threw the winning touchdown pass in high school. Well, how much more could you have been?
Right. You
know, and yeah, as cops, we do great things for a long time. But when that ends, is that going to define your entire life? Is that, you know, when you stand in front of God, do you want that to be the sole, okay, you did this for this many years, but you lived this many years. What did you do with all the other time you had on earth? You know, do you want to retire at this age only to have another 30 years of doing nothing and being miserable? Find something that's important. And it doesn't have to be like life-changing or world-altering. What's important to you? What's important to your family? If you find that thing, man, how good can your life be?
The nonprofit that you're working with, that's SEBA, correct?
No, it's our own 501c3.
Okay. And, so but SEBA is the one that does the Cannonball Rally.
They're one of our sponsors.
Okay, man, I'm confused then. So who actually puts on the Cannonball Rally Run that you were talking about?
Our organization.
And which one's that?
It's called Cannonball Memorial Run.
Okay, so that's the name of the organization.
That's the name of the organization. Yeah, we're a 501c3.
Got it.
So, and then SEBA is one of our sponsors. Got it. They sponsor the drive. So like last year, the last run, they paid for the vehicles and they helped sponsor the run.
Do you guys do the run each year the same time every year?
We try to. We haven't done it the last couple of years because COVID kind of like put just a kibosh on everything. And a lot of our sponsors pulled out with, you know, financial, like, I don't know if I'm going to have a business next month, so I really can't give you $25,000. So, but we're ramping back up now, and we normally try and do it around September. So that's hopefully not this September, but next September we'll be going again. So.
And do you have an anticipated date for when you're going to have your YouTube channel up and running? And
tentatively it was August 1st, but my daughter was sick the last 4 days and she got married last week. So probably by the end of the month, by the end of August. So we're going to Atlanta next week for a big woodworking show in Atlanta. So when we get back from that, she'll probably finish up the editing and we'll get that up. We got 2 videos filmed, so she's editing those. So well, that's outside of my bailiwick. She's like telling me all the stuff she's doing, and I'm like, okay, just talking to me about that is me talking to you about woodworking. So I'm like, this is a dado. And she's like, a what? I'm like, okay, it's a groove in the wood. So, oh, okay. I get that. So.
Well, I wish you the best with it all, and I appreciate your time.
Oh, no, I appreciate you having me down, and anything I can ever do for you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.